Welcome to the February 21st, 2019 evening business meeting. And I'd like Laurel Buttman, the interim county administrator, please take the roll.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize with us tonight we have Stephen Madcore for County Council, our County Council, and to my left, Kevin Moss is sitting in for our clerk to the board, Mary Rathke, tonight. And I will take the roll. Commissioner Reynolds.
Here.
Commissioner Savas.
Here.
Commissioner Schrader.
Here.
Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Commissioner Humberston.
Here.
Chair Bernard.
Here, please join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda, we will recess as the Board of County Commissioners and convene as the Housing Authority Board for the next item. I'd also like to introduce Housing Authority Commissioner Paul Reynolds.
Thank you.
The 6th Commissioner. And we'll start, go ahead, what are we doing next?
I will read the consent agenda by title only, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
All right. We have number 1, approval to execute an easement agreement between the Housing Authority of Clackamas County and Nathan C. Miller and McKenna Miller, and approval of resolution number 1936 for Housing Authority of Clackamas County to adopt the local contract review board rules, and that concludes the Housing Authority consent agenda.
Do any commissioners want to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve the Housing Authority consent agenda.
Is there it's been moved and seconded that we approve the Housing Authority consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, I'm going to announce that we'll adjourn as the Housing Authority Board and reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners for the remainder of the evening. And we have a presentation.
Yes, we do. I'd like to invite Greg Geist up to provide us with a presentation from Water Environment Services on the efforts of the West Advisory Committee. Thank you.
I think we'll just nod at Kevin. Okay. Are we on?
Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Greg Geist. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm the Director of Water Environment Services. I actually wasn't supposed to be up here tonight because Diana Helm, the chair of the West Advisory Committee, was going to do a co-presentation with Greg DiLoretto, but unfortunately she's ill today. I'm sure you all know Diana, former mayor of Damascus and active community member. She's also the chair of the West Advisory Committee, so she is missed tonight. I'll just do a quick introduction for Greg and then let him take it away. Greg serves as the chair of the American Society of Civil Engineers Committee on America's Infrastructure, responsible for ASCE's 2017 report card for America's infrastructure. Hopefully you've all heard about that.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Can you guys hear that back there? Is the mic on?
It's on. Just need to move it closer to you.
It looks
Okay.
pretty close.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Okay. It's hard to read through the microphone. Let's try this. Greg is a career leader in public works. He is the retired CEO of the Tualatin Valley Water District, an award-winning water utility located in metropolitan Portland, Oregon. Greg is also a past president of the American Society of Civil Engineers and the former chair of the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure. Greg is frequently called on by national media, Congress, and international organizations to provide insight into pressing infrastructure and water issues facing the United States. An industry veteran and engineering professional for over 40 years, Greg continues to be a strategic leader on infrastructure and sustainability on behalf of ASCE's 150,000 civil engineers around the world. It's a pleasure to have him as the vice chair of our advisory committee, and what he's going to unveil tonight is the first annual report out from the West Advisory Committee to the Board of County Commissioners, and we intend to continue this tradition into the future.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, or I could do it without them, but thank you. See if this works. Did it work? Nope. Oh, went there. It did start going. All right. Well, Chair Bernard, members of the commission, I want to, on behalf of our chair, Diana Helms, and the other members of the committee, I'd like to please to make this our first annual report to you on the activities of the Water Environment Services Advisory Committee. The WES Advisory Committee was formed late in 2017, and our purpose is to assist WES by providing input on surface water and wastewater issues affecting the WES customers. And as Diane noted, it is to learn as much as possible in order to make the best recommendations for our ratepayers. She also knows, and I agree, that it's safe to say that none of us on the committee takes this responsibility lightly. Now, we have a three-point charge. The first is to learn about the services WES provides and how WES provides those services. The second is to recommend positions based on the review and the discussion undertaken by the committee regarding the services WES provides, the policies, the plans, the projects, and the rates. And the third, then, is as committee members, we have an opportunity to engage as volunteers within WES activities, and WES has already made use of us as volunteers, and you'll see that in a minute. As a committee, we've enjoyed some lively discussion on the topics. And while they're lively, both Diana and I have appreciated the fact that everyone, it's a very respectful group in delving into subjects that many are not familiar with. Now, members of the WES Advisory Committee span a diverse cross-section of community members, from elected officials, business owners, environmental representatives, the development community, and direct users of WES treatment services. Our committee consists of 6 ratepayers from cities in the West service area. I'm one of those representatives. We have 2 ratepayers from unincorporated Clackamas County. We have 2 elected officials. We have 2 environmental representatives. We have 2 members of the development community. And we have 2 business owners or business representatives for a total of 16 people. As noted, one of our charges is to learn. And so this first year, that has been what we are primarily doing. Now this slide shows the areas we have studied, and the WES staff does an excellent job of explaining these topics in terms that the entire committee can understand. You as commissioners are fortunate to have such a great team as the WES leadership team in place. At our January meeting, we received a presentation on the 2018 to 2023 Capital Improvement Plan. There are 2 priorities that the CIP is to accomplish: capacity and reliability. The 5-year CIP proposes to expend $224.1 million to meet those priorities. The Advisory Committee has voted to recommend the approval of the proposed CIP. The committee continues the work with the staff on financial policies and rate settings, and last year the committee voted to recommend that rate increases not exceed 10% per year. Finally, the committee understands that there is concern over the governance of WES, and while the committee has not made a decision as to whether there is a problem, they did vote to recommend continued work with the Oregon Consensus Program. The Advisory Committee provides those of us with a passion in environmental treatment an opportunity to volunteer in various activities, some of which are shown on the slide. It's one of the reasons that I submitted an application to be a member of the committee, a chance to continue my over 40 years involvement in the environmental industry. So listed on this slide are the top priorities for WES in this coming year. Because the Advisory Committee represents such a broad spectrum of system customers, we are uniquely positioned to help the staff achieve these priorities. Some of our help will be direct. It says a lot about the team of WES and your leadership to create this committee, believing that our involvement will strengthen the provision of services to its customers. As Greg noted, I do things outside of the WES Advisory Committee, and I serve with the American Society of Civil Engineers. And as he noted, I'm called upon to testify before Congress, and I participate in a number of radio, print, television shows. As I respond to these requests, I've had the chance to see how other agencies provide similar services to WES. And I can tell you that WES does a good job of providing wastewater and surface water services in Clackamas County. But unfortunately, these services are buried and out of sight, and people don't think about them until they're not there. So as a result, The West staff have put together a series of forums to help the business community understand the importance of drinking water, stormwater, and wastewater to their businesses. These services are expensive to provide, and the goal with these forums is to help our business community understand their importance and to give advice on how to make preparations in the unlikely event that those services are temporarily lost. I hope you'll be able to attend one of those forums. And with that, thank you.
No, I just have a comment. I just want to thank Greg for participating in this. Greg and I have been on different committees over the years, and I remember him from Talton Valley Water District, so it's great work there. And so I think we're really fortunate to have you on board, and you're a member, a citizen of West Lynn, and a member of the district, one of the districts, so that's awesome. I just want to say, you know, I want to just echo a number of your comments you made, especially as far as the capacity issue. I mean, I've been following this for 22 years now, and learned a lot. It's been quite the interesting ride, and it's great to know that we have our capacity piece underway, an important building block for development and meeting our growth needs, number one. But more so on the environmental side, I think that my goal really, hopefully, within a short time here is to meet our coming regulations as it relates to I&I and water infiltration. And I'm really hoping that all of us can step up our game and recognize the problem, the challenge, and what we need to do to address that. So I appreciate your help and your work in the future, and look forward to your next report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The advisory committee might consider is the workforce. You know, it's hard to find people interested in working in this field, and I think that if we went back to grade schools, took them on a tour, gave them an opportunity to see what a great job it is and how important it is, we might be able to attract youth into exploring this field. So that's one thing I think. I know that the tours we did with the community were very well attended, and I think we should definitely continue that because people don't think about what we do. And I think this is a good representative group that well represents the community. So appreciate your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to citizen communication, and I have Les Poole, citizen communication. We have a separate list for the next item, so.
Hey, good evening. Les Poole. I live in Gladstone. Two things I want to mention real quickly, and then we'll get moving on to the hearing. One is I participated in the cap and tax bill hearing in Salem, and it goes by a variety of names, but it's HB 2020. And it's kind of one of those things that was put out as a draft, and who really knows where it's heading. So it's going to have a lot of impacts. They're trying to change some of the culture and changing people's behavior, and it costs a lot of money to do that. So we're going to feel financial impacts from that are positive, and we're going to feel financial impacts from that are negative. And I'm just troubled because it's a vague bill at this point. I think we get down the road a ways, and there'll be more clarity on what that carbon tax or whatever one wants to call it turns out to be. The other thing I want to mention briefly is that it's the third Thursday of the month. And we used to have evening meetings the third Thursday of the month. So I just want to say that I appreciate this hearing being held in the evening, and I'll continue to, for lack of a better word, lobby for evening meetings. So let me know how many signatures I need to collect in order to make that happen. Thank you.
Are you a registered lobbyist?
Or here.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna move on to the public hearing. This is the second reading of an ordinance number 01-2019, adding chapter 7.07, vehicle registration via Clackamas County Code. And we have Dan Johnson and Mike Besner, Department of Transportation and Development.
Hey, how are you?
Welcome. Well, clicker.
Can't trust him to drive the car. Good evening, Board. Again, Dan Johnson, Director of Clackamas County Department of Transportation and Development. And I am pleased to be here in front of you this evening, speaking to you once again about the possibility of the adoption of a vehicle registration fee for Clackamas County. Essentially, the presentation you're going to see has a lot of the same slides that you saw during the first presentation, during the first reading. It's a little more condensed, but we also have added some additional slides based off some of the comments that we heard. And we're going to get to those topics here immediately. So I want to bring emphasis to the words continuing the conversation for the road ahead. These are some of the topics and some of the headlines that have been publicized throughout our efforts. Essentially, while the measures themselves went back till 1986, I think was our first funding measure ask, this dialogue has been ongoing to some extent since 2007. Just some of the various notes and publications that we've had and discussions with the community we've had to date. This specific slide is in reference to some comments that were made during the first hearing, which were outreach to date. Folks don't know what's going on. I want to highlight a couple things in here. There was intention about trying to get the word out to as many people as possible regarding the efforts under consideration this evening. A couple things that are up there that are big deals. One, ClackCo Quarterly. It's mailed to all residences within Clackamas County. There were two specific items that were entered within that in February and November. ClackCo Monthly Email, approximately 12,000 subscribers. We did information sharing on November, December, and January. And I'm not going to read through the rest of the list, but you can see kind of the extensive public outreach that we've had to date. We've had specific discussions with the board on 5 different occasions, which are listed up there, which reach back all the way till December 18th of 2018 to January 9th. But let's get to the discussion on why we're here. So let's talk about our road system to start with. You have all seen this slide before. I whittled it down. In all honesty, I don't think it did it justice when I whittled down the list of elements that comprise probably one of the single biggest public assets in Clackamas County. But this gives you a snapshot of what our road system is, and by ours, the citizens of Clackamas County within our county jurisdiction. You've heard terms like this before: 1,400 miles of roadway, 40 of those in cities. You've heard linear feet of guardrail, 111,000, 27,000 traffic signs, and you can read the rest of the list on your own. They're included in your packet, but you can imagine the scope and scale and breadth of the maintenance responsibilities that we have and the capital needs we have within our current county. As with our last presentation and all of our public presentations, we'd like to take a second and kind of share with folks the history around transportation funding. One, it breaks down into 2 different silos, one of which is maintenance and the second is capital. Let's start with maintenance. The majority of our money that we get for our maintenance program is secured through the State Highway Fund. It's what we call our road fund. Generally speaking, I think it was 24 to 25 million? Yeah. Before HB 2017, 24 to 25 million, roughly, to provide those maintenance services on those 1,400 linear road miles. We did secure, there was timber receipt revenue that came into the road fund or provided for road maintenance services, which was subsequently supplanted by secure rural schools. That used to be a pretty significant amount of money. It was around $5 million. Most recently in this last budget cycle, it's whittled down to about $330,000, give or take. And the future of that is unknown at this point in time. But essentially, those 2 funding sources comprise the majority of funds that go into providing maintenance for Clackamas County. Let's talk about capital for a second. Capital. So capital projects, these are These range from everything from turn lanes, signal improvements, additional signals, new roads, widening of roads, etc. Those you can see from the breakdown on the right here, essentially almost 50% of the funding that we get for capital are secured through either federal, state, or other grants. So those are grant programs that are established by other entities where we try to secure money to meet the capital needs within Clackamas County. Those needs and those grants are established by other entities with the values of those other entities. So for example, in the federal and state primarily, some large grant projects have been around bridges, things of that nature. Obviously within our urban area, you have a lot of multimodal type grants. That gives you kind of a flavor of what those grants kind of tend to lean towards. Urban renewal has been a big part of our program. We leverage those dollars against some of those grant opportunities. It's been about 33% over the last 20 years, give or take, but there's limits. You can only use that urban renewal money within certain geographic boundaries. And for certain projects that are located within those urban renewal plans. We cannot spend urban renewal money that is located with, that is secured from a certain district, and we cannot use that money outside of that district. There are limits to that, and all of those urban renewal areas are within our urban area. We have 4 urban renewal districts, just for the sake of discussion. 3 of the levies within 4 of those districts have been terminated. The only one that we're still collecting revenue on is the North Clackamas Revitalization Area. Next is transportation system development charges. Those comprise about 16% of our revenue. Having said that, those are also limited. We can only use those funds that are secured through new development, and it's a fee paid by new development when it occurs, for capacity improvements associated with projects. So if it's additional lanes, or if it's a right turn lane, or something that provides additional capacity within a system, those where those dollars are used. The majority of our projects, we have to match other funding with that SDC funding to actually use it. There are very few projects that are 100% SDC fundable. Last but not least, road fund. We have used our road fund mostly as match. The maximum ever, I think, is $1 million, give or take, that we have used to secure capital funding, but that is the limit. That is a limited amount of money that because we tend to direct the majority of those funds towards maintenance. We use those dollars towards maintaining our current system. So let's talk about HB 2017. State legislature came in in 2017 and actually approved this House bill. Essentially, it is going to increase our revenue from the state. In approximately 9 years, it should top out somewhere around $13 million. Of additional funding. The message and discussion we have been having to date with the community was the need and the priority to use those dollars towards maintaining our arterial and collector systems, the larger capacity roadways. And so we are advancing those funds and directing those funds towards that purpose. Right now, we're looking to program additional revenue in our arterial and collector paving packages. Increasing it from $3 million on average, annual average, to $8.5 million on an annual average. That's urban and rural. In addition, also, we are highlighting the fact that we do not have a local road paving program. Those are smaller classification roadways that are in our local neighborhoods, the roads that are by our houses. We do not have a program that picks up those roads. All of those dollars go towards arterials and collectors. We have increased focus on ADA improvements. There's a lot of recent history around that and a recent case law. Our folks have been proactive in that discussion and have taken the approach of developing an action plan, which we are implementing now. We are going to direct additional monies from this revenue to that need. Safety improvements. We have staff in the audience that can speak to this if we need to. One of the only adopted safety action plans, and we have a list of projects that are safety related. I'm not sure if you want to expand on that, what those maybe might entail.
I could do that in a little bit.
Okay. And last but not least is capital. You'll see capital there at the bottom. We are choosing not to direct any of those funds towards capital revenue whatsoever. We are directing those funds all towards maintenance, which is consistent with the discussion we've been having with the community to date, what our initial and primary need was. I'm not sure if you recall back then, but we were talking about these jaws of death, how increasing costs, deteriorating road systems, The fact that those two deltas get larger and larger year to year. This has addressed a good portion of that, a large majority of that, around our arterial and our collector systems, which is great news. Let's talk about service needs. This is a list, and this is not only just our list of what we think our citizens we know our citizens are asking for from us, but there are also some needs that we know that we have to address. And you can see the list up there: capital construction and project relief. Our capital funding is limited, very limited. So one of the main topics, if you recall, and I forgot those facts from our last presentation, we do a survey every 2 years. And the last couple of years, one of the top topic has been, a concern of our citizen has been congestion relief. And how do you build new capital improvements to address the growing population in and around our community? Local road maintenance. Like I said, we don't have a local road maintenance program. Safety, we've talked about ADA curb ramps, multimodal improvements, and relocating transportation maintenance, which is a need that we have. Our facility is currently in the floodplain. So we basically took this list. Well, let's back up. From this list, you know, you think about how other entities deal with these problems. Because I've had folks talk to me, why can't we be more like Washington County? That's a statement they make. This shows you why we can't do what Washington County is doing out there. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'm saying that they have additional revenue sources that they pull from. So Washington County, on average, through their 4 various sources of revenue, local revenue, are securing approximately $48.9 million. They have a local gas tax, road district, local property tax, and a vehicle registration fee that was recently adopted. I want to point out the fact that local property tax, that option no longer exists because of Measure 5 and Measure 50. It was in place when those measures were adopted, and that firmed up that particular revenue source. Multnomah, you can see they have 1,300 miles of roadway. Multnomah County, they have 2 local sources, local gas tax and a vehicle registration fee, which bring in approximately $17.9 million. I highlight the fact that the road miles are very minimal, 230, but I also highlight the fact that they have a lot of responsibility around the bridge systems in and around the city of Portland that have significant cost to those. And last but not least, you have Clackamas County with 1,400 plus linear miles and no local source of revenue. So we took that list and we started a discussion, and that's the important thing is to look at the fact that we are continuing the dialogue we had before HB 2017. And we took that list and we talked with business leaders, community leaders, cities, and there were some priorities that were set and some interests and some funding preferences, and you can see those up there. There was a service priorities around congestion relief. There was a desire to actually develop a local road maintenance program. There was a desire around the need for additional safety improvements. There was interest in the development of, because if you think about the tool, which is a vehicle registration fee, or any funding tool, there's a split and a share with the cities. For VRF, it's a 60-40 split by statute. So there was talk about how do we collaborate more productively with other jurisdictions within Clackamas County to get more from less. So there's a talk about the development of what we call a strategic investment fund, which we'll talk about here in a moment. And last but not least, there was a discussion on what their preferences were and what their desires were related to a funding source. And the dialogue resonated around this vehicle registration fee. The $30 was more of a discussion with C4, our coordinating committee, on what that rate may be. And that was the number that was landed on that minimized impacts to the extent feasible on our various citizens in Clackamas County, but raised enough money to actually provide some dent and relief and movement on some of these topics. So what's the impact to the motorist? As with every presentation we did out in the community, we're very clear. $30 per year, it's $60 paid every 2 years when motorists renew the vehicle registrations. It lists their items that it is not applicable to. It does include motorcycles, and it provides you a list of things that it excludes as well. Heavy trucks obviously are not subject to the VRF as they pay a weight mile tax. So this is the essentially when we talked about the 60-40 split, the members up here identify for you how that split would be, how that 40% split that would go to the cities would be distributed. We've actually talked to a large number of those cities, and obviously you can see the differing amounts of revenue that goes to those cities based on their population. The desire and the feedback we got from the cities was essentially that it would cover some they would do capital construction with, those folks that were getting more. Some they would do general maintenance, those folks who were getting a little bit less. And there was a desire and a focus to direct some of that revenue towards multimodal improvements as well. We can look down below and talk about Clackamas County. That's actually, and actually I'm going to draw your attention to the Strategic Investment Fund, the white box at the bottom. That is a 10% set aside of the county's 60%. So it's 10% of our money that would go to the Clackamas County. We have chosen to set aside in the Strategic Investment Fund. Those funds would be directed by Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, C4. And at this point, there's a desire to focus on two primary areas of improvement, one of which is possibly capital projects, where you might have multi-jurisdictional interest in a capital project, and these funds may be used as gap financing. Or there's the possibility and the interest in road transfers. We talked about 40 miles of county roads that are in cities. The cities wish to have control of those roads. They wish to urbanize those roads to their standards, which is something that we don't do with Clackamas County. We have 16 cities. We wouldn't like to develop roads to 16 different standards. We remain pretty hard and fast on how those roads are developed. They're developed at county standards, so our maintenance folks can develop at one standard and maintain at one standard. But they would like to urbanize them, and if they like to urbanize them, then they have to be transferred. So there's interest on both parts on facilitating road transfers within the city. So you get back to how we would use the funds that would come to Clackamas County. These are the interests that we heard from our citizens and our businesses. We would be looking to direct about $1 million to a local road paving package, which again, those are the local, smaller classification roadways that are located around our neighborhoods. We'd also look to increase the safety budget for safety improvements, increase from $1.76 million to about $2.26 million. And last but not least, a large majority of that money, $3.5 to $4 million a year, would go into the development of an expansion and facilitation of a capital program. Keep in mind that capital program would be able to not only benefit our urban but our rural folks. A lot of the problems that we have right now are providing capital funds for rural projects. If you looked at the funding sources that we had for our grants, meaning the fact that it was federal, state, local, a lot of those options, with the exception of bridge improvement projects, really aren't viable for our rural folks that are out in rural Clackamas County. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. There were discussions around some gaps and what these numbers meant and what it meant for projects. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike Besner, the Assistant Director.
Okay, thanks. So I'm just going to take these one at a time. So first is safety, where we talked about investing about $500,000 a year. So when it comes to gaps with safety, it's kind of a difficult thing to address. There's no real number that you could point to. We do have an ambitious goal in the county, and we're going to be updating it pretty soon with the board. We've talked about this, our Transportation Safety Action Plan that Dan mentioned earlier. We're going to propose a goal of eliminating fatalities and serious injury crashes in Clackamas County by 2035. And obviously to do that does take investments. The TSAP will have projects in it, but it's not adopted yet. So to clarify this a little bit, but the $500,000 addition to the 1.2 or so million that we're going to dedicate the House Bill 2017 money to safety would be about a 28% increase in safety funding. And actually in the years before the House Bill 2017 money completely ramps up, it's about a 40% increase. So it's a good investment. It's an increased investment in our system. And I live here too, and I want our roads to be as safe as possible. I got a 16-year-old who's just starting to drive. It scares the heck out of me. So anyway, everything we can do to help is great. So the kinds of things we can do with that, and all these prices are averages and ballparks in ways, they all depend on the site. So if you have one in mind, it might be higher, might be lower, depending on the site. But always stop control. with flashers. We've been doing some always stop conversions throughout the county the last 10 years or so, and they've been, for the most part, pretty well received, but they've all been pretty well effective. They can reduce crashes by 60%, and that's from data throughout the country. Examples, I apologize, it's cut off there. That should be township, but you know, like a Canby Markham Lone Elder intersection and a Central Point Township would be good candidates for that. Widening road shoulders with safety features. If you drive throughout the county, our shoulders are not as wide as we would like them to be. They were built a long time ago before we had standards. And we could add other safety features to them. For example, rumble strips, potentially thickened edge lines. The white line on the edge of the road helps keep people focused. Those can reduce crashes by 50%. And there's a whole laundry list of projects where we can improve our shoulders. Can you advance it, Dan? Curve warning signs, a little more bang for the buck there, or at least less expensive. Also reduce crashes. We've been replacing some of these throughout the county already, but we could do more. Guardrail, totally depends on the length, but there's places, again, we have guardrail projects that we would love to do. They're effective in reducing injuries. The rapid flash beacons to help people cross the road. An example of that is potentially at Monterey and 90th, right across from the town center. Also, and we've seen an uptick in pedestrian crashes throughout the region and frankly the country in the last few years, and it's an area we're going to have to continue to address. Dan. Okay, local roads, so $1 million a year. So PCI is Pavement Condition Index, and it's how we've decided, and it's along with pretty much most agencies, if not all in the state, it's how they rate their roads. And it's a visual measure of what the road looks like. It takes into account potholes and cracks and everything else, surface defects in the road. Our county goal is to have a PCI, an average PCI of 70. It's a 0 out of 100 scale, and 70 is good, okay? So that's what we've said is our goal as a county. So our local roads fall a little short of that. And you can see there at the bottom, 107 miles of our urban local roads, and that's out of 204 total, are below that. And 127 miles of our rural local roads out of 478 total are below that. The average PCI in the rural area actually is right now 71. In the urban area, it's actually only 58, which is not where we want it to be. And obviously, it'll take investments. $1 million a year isn't going to get us there. It'll help us tread water, though, so things don't get worse. So if we talk about a gap, ideally, a program to pave the locals, if we wanted to get our PCI up to 70 and keep it there, would be probably more along the lines of $4 to $6 million a year. So if you're looking for gap, $3 to $5 million a year. And I'm giving a range there because we have lots of different kinds of local roads. Some require full reconstructions, which means the whole base is toast and we have to rip it all out. Those are going to cost a little more. We have some where, frankly, just a little preventative maintenance is probably okay for a few years. So they can vary. Okay, capital and congestion. So when we did our transportation system plan a few years ago, we did a financial analysis. We tried to figure out how much money do we think we're going to have for capital projects over the next 20 or so years. I think we actually looked at 23 years. And we did an analysis based on all the sources that Dan already pointed out, urban renewal, SDCs, grants. We thought we'd average about $19 million a year as a capital program, $19 million a year. And so we said, all right, we're going to pick $19 million a year over this 20 years and call that Tier 1. Our highest priority projects. And unfortunately, that was only 15% of the entire TSP. So 85% of our 20-year TSP is unfunded. So if we think we're going to have $19 million a year, and that's only 15%, that's a $105 million gap to complete our 20-year transportation system plan. It's an enormous number. If we look at it a little differently, did you skip a slide by any chance? Yeah. If we look at it a little differently, The $3.5 to $4 million a year when combined to the 19 is actually a 20% per year increase over what we're currently forecasting to have as an average. And as Dan pointed out, the difference is most of that other money, we don't have a lot of say in where we want to spend it. I mean, we apply, but it has to meet other people's criteria. We don't have a dedicated source of funds that we could then say, hey, what are our priorities? What do we want to spend this on in our TSP? So the proposal would be pick projects located throughout the county that are on our current TSP. This has already been vetted through the public exhaustively a few years ago. We would go to the different regions of the county, talk about the Tier 1 projects, have people part of that process to talk about, hey, what do we want in our community? And select it based on our own values and needs with that input. So the kinds of capital projects that we have, and again, these costs can vary quite a bit. I could tell you roundabouts can be quite expensive if there's a lot of terrain. But, $2 million. They also have a big crash reduction factor, so we can get bang for our buck here in a lot of these capital projects and also help with safety. There's a few examples. The Beaver Creek area, Canby, Markham, and Gribble, Stafford 65th, Redland, Ferguson, just in Stafford Borland, obviously, is one we built a number of years ago. We have a lot of projects in our TSP when it comes to congestion for adding turn lanes, a lot of them. They're also very good at safety and reducing crashes, in addition to helping with congestion so people don't get stuck behind cars wanting to turn left or right for that matter at times. And so again, we have a whole suite of projects where we could do that. So when we comb and this is just an illustrative example to give just idea of some projects that, for the most part, grant money is just not available for. But projects that our communities, when we did our transportation system plans said these are really important to us. And you can see it runs the gamut, and like I say, this is just 6 of dozens of projects, or 7 of dozens of projects. Beaver Creek, Canby, Markham, Concord, Eagle Creek Road, Redlands, Stafford, Welch's Road. The list can go on and on. But this is what we would have an opportunity then to go out to communities and talk about and get energized about and get excited about.
So real quick, I just want to, obviously that's our website we have up there if there's information, if members of our community are watching this evening. A couple things I want to make sure that we're really, really clear on. We prepared a list with the information that we've been hearing to date. What are the needs of our community and what are the needs that we think we have within Clackamas County? We took that list to the business community. And we took that list to the community as a whole and had a discussion around what their priorities were. These are not all of our priorities, those are their priorities. So you had those 3 things: local road program, capital and congestion relief, and safety improvements. That's what their priorities were. We talked to our coordinating committee about, and other entities and other businesses around what's an acceptable method for revenue, for funds for these various improvements and priorities that you have. They landed on the VRF. We talked to that community and our coordinating committee about what that rate should look like. We tested rates on what it should look like. That's where the $30 came from. So, I want to make sure that we have been clear with all of the public when we meet with them every single time. If this gets approved or doesn't get approved, it's not going to change the service that we're providing our citizens today. We have revenue to meet the maintenance needs on those large-scale arterials and collectors. We're going to provide that service. Now, if you ask me the question about where the funding is going to come for the rest of those items on there, we don't have a lot of answers for that. You saw that list of projects. Every community we go to had a project they would want done. Estacada was a great one. I see my Estacada friends here. Estacada was a great one. It was a discussion around Old Eagle Creek Highway. And the dialogue was, I don't know how we are going to get revenue to fix that project, to do a project out there. I mean, we're really good at what we do, and we look for funds wherever we can get them. I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know where that funding is going to come from. And so this is an it's a revenue source that aligns with the values of Clackamas County and what we want to do with our money, be it in the urban or rural needs that we have, and provides us a funding source that we can direct, that you can direct through our budget process towards projects that we need. But again, we will continue to provide the great service that our transportation maintenance folks and engineering folks are doing right now, should this not pass, or should you choose not to go forward with it. That's all we have. Yep.
So I have a question. Sunrise Phase 1, which is an ODOT project, in case you don't know, that's the extension of 224. How was that? What was our contribution, and how was our contribution, how was that contribution funded? I know what that is, but other people might not, because that was one of the first, I guess, expressways built in years.
Yeah, an extension of the 224 expressway in Milwaukee.
Yeah, it was the first one in how long?
When did they build the 224 expressway?
Oh.
Mayor
Well, my
Bernard?
father was the mayor of Milwaukee after that, so in the early 60s. So how did we fund the extension?
Our local money that we secured for that particular project, our largest contribution came through a willing seller, willing buyer program through our urban renewal, Clackamas industrial area. We became proactive in trying to secure right-of-way, which then reduced the total overall cost and allowed the state to fund the project.
And then
And that was to the tune of about $20 million. And it was, and make sure we're very clear with our public, willing seller, willing buyer, so.
All right, Paul?
Yeah, I, just based on the comments I heard at the last first hearing, and also for the benefit of our newest colleagues, Commissioner Humberston and Commissioner Fisher, I thought just a brief history lesson on what's taken place at least in the last 8 or 9 years regarding this. So C4, the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, with cities and special districts and community groups, CPOs, hamlets, villages, set a course on trying to solve this long-standing funding problem. I went back in the archives back in the 90s when we put measures on the ballot that failed. So we put together a concerted effort, and we're working diligently and positively, very constructive discussion, very detailed on how we would come across this. And we put a number of work in. I remember Deidre, sitting in the audience, one of our staff members, did a great spreadsheet where we played with numbers and rates and everything to try to come up with answers. And after 2.5 years, we were getting really close to a solution, but it was all predicated on, I just want to just say, it was all predicated on the time of knowing the political dynamics and what we were really facing, and also knowing there's a maintenance element of this and there's a capital element of this, meaning capital for congestion relief, for safety projects, for building roads where there are no roads, and so on. So, you know, we all took that seriously, and unfortunately, in June of, I believe it was June of 2013, the previous commission or commissioner or two decided to take that project away from C4 and basically embrace it. And then Chair Ludlow and Commissioner Smith decided to drill down and make sure that every dollar of what we get in gas tax revenue and all those resources were well spent. And, you know, what we heard in the past through the years is, well, what do you do with the money you get now? And all those things. And I know that they did their darnest. We've done our darnest. Commissions before us did their darnest to make sure that we were really efficient with the gas dollars we have. So the gaps that you heard are real. The gaps back then in 2013 or 2014 or 15, just before we put it on the ballot, staff identified a $17 million gap in maintenance, not just maintenance only. So we set about a way to, number one, notify everyone. And Mike, Dan, you guys put together a great example of all the notification we've done. And every household in this county got a newsletter with this, with at least 2 articles that I can recall in there speaking on this. So I think we've done pretty good outreach. But back in 2016, we determined that really the best way to get to the voters, knowing number one, that C4 recognized that the political reality was this would probably be remonstrated. So we decided that we would just willingly put it on the ballot. And that last commission did the same thing. And what better way to communicate with the voters other than to put an advisory vote on the ballot saying, do you want us to come back with a solution and put before you a ballot measure to solve this problem? And the answer was 60% a yes. And so in November of 2016, we did just that.
I know.
And we followed through. However, what we agreed upon all along, through all those prior years and up to that point, was the cities and the county would provide a list of all the projects and where we would put those dollars. This was a 7-year levy, and it would terminate after 7 years. And that would get, number one, build trust. Number two, we would do the projects we'd say we do. And if we did our job, the voters would probably come back and say, yeah, let's do it again for round 2, for another 7 years or 5 years. I mean, that was the concept. And all again to build trust. Well, the voters didn't pass that November ballot for a 6-cent gas tax. And I thank staff. This is really about an equivalent amount of dollars that would have generated for the county, pretty close, except in this time it's VRF, vehicle registration fee. So while we've done our due diligence, this board, past boards, as I mentioned, have done our due diligence to make sure we're spending every dollar as wisely as we can. We've still got this gap. And just to clarify, Mike, you mentioned the gap on maintenance was $4 to $5 million with this passing?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say for local roads.
Okay, so we'll have if we pass this and it survives a remonstrance, or whether or not there's a remonstrance, we'll still have about a $4 to $5 million.
Oh, I think it was 3 to 5, and gap. It was. I think that the need for locals to get them up to snuff would be 4 to 6.
Right. Now, we do have a real responsibility to take care of at least one of these problems, whether it's maintenance or capital. Capital is, I mean, everyone's facing that. That's really an unfunded mandate of sorts, so we really can't get there. But at least maintenance we could. So I am totally cognizant of that responsibility. I'm totally willing to find a way to get there. And I think that, and I said it last month, or last hearing, I've said it months prior, whatever we do has got to survive a remonstrance. Whatever package we put forth today, because I strongly believe, and I think some of us have heard, that this will be remonstrated. So we can let it be remonstrated, or we can put it on the ballot. I would suggest that whatever we do, that we make it attractive enough that it will be supported by the voters ultimately, and then decide whether or not we put it on the ballot. But that's not what's before us today. I think what's before us today is we're going to pass a VRF for this amount, for $30 a year, $60 when you renew your vehicle, and we're going to fix or have enough funds for half of it. But I do want to I'll close with this and say that Tuesday night when we were out of Canby and we had our public involvement process for the Canby Ferry, at the end of that meeting, I was approached by 2 people, and one who lived inside, I think, Mikey, you were standing there, one who lived outside Canby in the rural area, and one person later on, I don't think you were there, that was inside the city of Canby. And they both asked me one question I couldn't answer. And I think, frankly, it's a question I hear almost every day, everywhere I go. If you pass this, what roads will you fix? And I understand that you have clearly said where you'll put your dollars, but the specificity in that list of projects, and I just realized I forgot something. The cities back in 2016 did not, in the end, we were hoping that they would actually provide the list of projects for the cities, because we're not just raising the VRF for the people in the unincorporated. They're doing this county-wide. So we don't have a list of projects from the cities. I was hoping by this time that when we sat up here, we would have a list of the projects from the cities and a list of projects from the county, so we can answer those questions. And I tell the person, yes or no, your local road or your whatever road it may be will or will not be fixed, or it's programmed to be fixed in year whenever. And I think it's really important, whether it's a wastewater treatment plant or it's a water plant or whatever you're doing, when you go before the voters or you put something out there, you're telling the voters what you're doing. When you pass the budget, you've got a capital plan, you're telling them what you're going to build. They pay the rate, they know what they're going to get. This doesn't have that, and that's my discomfort with this. So I'll stop there and just express that. I think I covered what I wanted to cover at this point.
You have a response? Yes.
Well, I'll just you know, in 2016, the county did have a list of, that was for paving, the gas tax. That was pre-House Bill 2017, so we did have a list. The county did, and yeah, the cities didn't necessarily. We can control what we can control, but we had one. But those were all paving projects. So this time around, I would say we do have a list, and it's our TSP and our Tier 1 projects. And we have advertised that, and in one, I think, I don't remember if our website shows it, but somewhere along there was a handout again, and I showed some, you know, example Tier 1 projects today. I think, and as I mentioned, part of the process will be going to each of these areas and saying, hey, here's what we as staff heard 5 years ago or whatever it was. But we want to have the conversation again and talk about what project you all want. So, you know, we can come up with that list. It might not reflect all the values that are out there today necessarily. But it does come from our TSP, so I mean, we do have a list.
TSP, I'm looking at the list right now. The TSP from the work that we've done has approximately 37 projects on it.
In Tier 1.
In Tier 1.
That in Tier 1 that we identified is within the spirit of what the money would go to, which was congestion.
37 projects. Those projects range in cost from $570,000 to 11.6 million. And they are spread throughout the county: Beaver Creek, Beaver Creek, Boring, Canby, Estacada, Happy Valley, Milwaukee, Malino. They have an urban-rural flavor because our intent was to go out and really engage. I mean, you bring up a great point. And in the spirit of not predetermining for our community, when we went and spoke to, we did 4 community engagement opportunities out in Welch's. We did one at Estacada. We did one at Oak Grove and Malala. Yeah, thank you. And the intent was, we have this list from our TSP. Our plan is to go back and engage that committee and say, hey, here are the list of projects that we think are a priority based on data. What do you think is a priority based on the fact that you live in this area? And educating them and having them educate us about what they think their needs might be. Maybe they obviously live, work, and play in that area, and will know more about what they think their priorities might be. But we have a list. The cities, to your point, we've engaged them. We do not have a list.
Yeah, I personally met with 12 or 13 of them, and their needs are so varied depending on who they are. I mean, some of them are barely keeping their head above water. Others have the luxury of being able to do capital projects, and so their answers were so mixed. It would be, some of them, it would be probably even hard for them to come up with a list, but yeah.
Okay, Martha.
Yeah, thank you. I have a few questions as I'm going through this, but I just want to start by saying I do think one of the things government should do is infrastructure. That is one of our fundamental roles, is to provide roads and water and sewer and those things that really do affect our ability to get from A to B and affect our quality of life and our public health. Infrastructure, we can actually have conversations about other things that maybe you think we as government should not be doing, but I think largely what I've heard through the years since I've been on this board, largely from 2003, is that infrastructure is something everybody seems to coalesce around, that like, yeah, you need to get things built for folks. But one of the things I'm finding out that, I think you've probably already answered it, but I'm going to ask it again. I think you kind of had. But I think the public, I just want to make sure that they understand, because there's angst out there that, you know, there was a transportation bill in 2017, okay? It's much more prescriptive. It is, when I look at the information, giving us significant dollars when it really ramps up. Still isn't going to meet the need. But it's more prescriptive, and can we assert that one of the reasons a vehicle registration fee would be a good thing, despite the fact I think all of us, you know, I mean, I know my income isn't, you know, we're all going to have income issues. I understand that. Does it give us more flexibility in terms of what we can decide locally about what we want to do? Because my observation is we've jimmied money together based on what other people are telling us that we can do with the money. This actually gives us a little bit more flexibility in that we can respond more directly to our citizens. Would that be a fair, could we kind of talk about that a little
It
bit?
does on the capital side. So House Bill 2017, I wouldn't say that was prescriptive because it's road fund.
Yeah, but
But-
what do we do to convince people that, okay, VRF is a, yeah.
Well,
gives us some
I mean, I think
flexibility.
that's what the presentation was about, to show the things that, these are, and then Dan mentioned, these are things that we could do if we had our own funding source for county roads, that without it,
It's just
we either
gonna-
cut other things that we're currently doing, because it's a zero-sum game, right? We either cut other things that we're currently doing, you know, pave less arterials and collectors, which we're not recommending, you know, or find more money to do it. Or we just don't address those extra safety concerns or capital concerns or local roads.
But those safety concerns will save lives. I mean, with
Absolutely.
our Drive to Zero piece that I know we've been doing, we have significant data to show the public and to show our constituency, rural, urban, and suburban, that lives have been saved because we do those safety
Can I ask one?
safety
Can I-
pieces. Yeah,
Provide a little clarity?
Sure.
Mike, can I ask you a question? Based on the information that you saw up there today, the fact that we're losing urban renewal funds, the fact that majority of our money is coming from federal, state, and other regional funding sources through grants, and through the limited amount that we can use through tax and increment financing, and the fact that we are directing most of our money towards road maintenance, can you tell me how you think that we're going to fund improvements to Beaver Creek Road?
Yeah, I don't know.
Can you tell me how we're going to fund improvements to Johnson Creek Boulevard?
We don't have mechanisms to do it.
Can you tell me how we're going to fund the sidewalk improvements on Welch's Road?
No.
Those are the questions that we are getting asked. And we are getting asked those questions on, and we don't have answers for that. And it's not a fact that, it's the fact that the tools that we have at our disposal to try to get project money for those types of projects, through the grant programs, urban renewal we can't use, we're losing the urban renewal tool, they aren't out there. So we can't answer those questions to our citizens when they ask us those questions. How are we gonna improve local roads?
let's do, please.
Don't know.
Thank you for that, because that's kind of what I'm trying to tease out for people, because, you know, I've been here since 2003. We've referred a number of things to the ballot, and one of the things that I've always worried about is that folks need to know our timber receipts used to pay for us, because we had flexibility with that money, I think.
Yes.
And when you see a drop from 5 million to
300,000.
330,000, and we really actually had dollars that we were using, but those dollars have gone away, which is why we're looking for alternatives. You know, and we could argue, you know, why can't we harvest? That's a whole nother discussion. But the reality now is that we haven't had the flexible funding to answer the questions of our citizens here locally. Okay. The other thing is, I want to try and clarify this from my own head a little bit. So the larger arterial and collector systems, can you give me an example of some roads that represent that, not only from my own knowledge, but for the public? Like the big stuff we do now, give me the name of a road.
Sunnyside.
Okay.
Summers.
Go rural.
Beaver Creek.
Okay.
Springwater. Redland. Welch's.
So, and they're called arterials and collectors because they do have larger traffic volumes. What are the thresholds with those compared to the
Oh,
smaller roads?
it's not that cut and dry. And
Okay,
actually,
but
that got
this is-
updated with our TSP also, by
Okay.
the way, update. We reevaluated our system. But local roads are roads that, for most people, bring you to your driveway. You pull out of your driveway, and not everybody, but most people, you're on a local road. Don't get a lot of traffic. A lot of them don't get a lot of truck traffic, but, you know, just lower volume roads. Those usually, in an ideal system, will connect to what we call a collector,
Okay.
right? Slightly larger road, joins up lots of locals, and that'll eventually hit an arterial, which is our larger roads.
Okay, and so what we're really trying to get at is those smaller roads those smaller neighborhood areas. Can you give me some examples of what
can.
what that, for, again, I get it, I've been doing it a while, but just to give people visuals, the public, like what would, kind of a road would that be?
So like in the urban area, Salmonberry, it's one I get calls about all the time.
Okay.
Outside, it's not too far from here. We've got Y East up in Government Camp. We have Gibson Road. We've got, I mean, we have hundreds of miles of them. They're all over the place, but they're the smaller roads that we have.
And if we don't maintain them, what happens to them?
Well, the ones that are already in poor condition are going to remain that way. And the ones that are in good condition eventually will deteriorate to fair and eventually poor.
And is that kind of when we talk about just turning them into gravel, because at that point it becomes so prohibitive that we can't?
Well, we haven't done it yet, but yeah, I mean, if you can't afford to maintain a paved road at some point, I know it's happened in other places, they do just grind them up and let them go as gravel.
Okay. And thank you for those questions. I think that's kind of answered what I wanted to ask about this, because this is kind of a tough choice. Because it's come to my attention, there are folks out there, for example, that want to refer this, that it's highly likely there will be a referendum if we vote to put this into an ordinance. And the only thing I worry about a little bit is if we refer it, we control the message. All right, if someone else refers it, it becomes their message. And what I worry about, that the clarity of why we're doing this will get lost. It doesn't mean that I won't be supportive of going, kind of just doing the ordinance, but I do want us to be aware, the public is experiencing sticker shock across the board. I think we're headed towards another recession. I just want to put this in the context of what we deal with in the outside world. There are folks on fixed incomes, but, that's hard too. I guess what I'm trying to state here that we are really, if it gets referred, we are really going to have to be really clear with people about what we are gaining from this, because there's going to be a lot of things out there that people are struggling with. It'll make it harder for them to get to a yes vote. But one way or the other, I do think we need to do something. I don't see any other way. I've been here where we've referred things pretty constantly. They have gone down. If we do an ordinance or go ahead and move ahead with that, that's a signal that we're really taking the risk as a political body to actually try to make the right decision for infrastructure. But I don't think that we should be naive enough to think that it may not get referred. You'll have people messaging, and it could get kind of tough out there. So I just want to point that out, that I think we're going to have our work ahead of us, no matter whether we refer it or whether we just go ahead and say, okay, we're going to do the ordinance, because there are people poised and ready to, kind of throw stones, I think.
And the other side also is, we get phone calls. I know the board gets a lot of phone calls, but we get phone calls from the public all the time about the safety of their road, the traffic on their road, and the condition of their road. And this would give us an opportunity to begin to address those concerns, as opposed to if we don't do anything, nothing will happen.
Okay, and we also have to be clear, though, that even with this, we'll still experience gaps, because there's never, that's just the way of it.
Like, we're being transparent about what those are.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you.
Okay, so next time, from now on, I want to do something a little different. People hang around here. Some people have to leave because we talk so much. From now on, I'd like to do this. The staff presents, somebody makes a motion, we second it, then then the public comments, then somebody makes a motion, we second it, then we have the discussion. Because last time, 4 or 5 people had to leave before we got to them. So from now on, I want to do it that way. That's Robert's rules. You present, we ask questions, not make comment, and then we move on to open the public hearing, close the public hearing, a motion's made, and if it's not seconded, we're done for the evening. If it is seconded, then we discuss it, because we're just spending way too much time in it, and
So
people
Chair,
leave.
I think it's very important to make these points, and I am familiar
Well,
with
you can make
Robert's
the
rules
points
of,
after the motion's made too.
Robert's Rules of Order.
Because he has a light on. I mean, that's just the way, I think it's a better way to do it. Because, like I said, last time we lost 5 people. Not tonight, I don't know that
I
we've
don't,
lost any.
I don't see anybody leaving tonight.
No, I haven't seen him leave.
Okay.
But Ken's up next.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to hear from the public. I do have comments to make, but I think that you're correct, and I'll defer my comments till after we've heard from the public. So I would place a motion on the floor to read the ordinance by title only.
Well, first we open the public.
Yeah. Let's hear
That
the
way?
public.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
I'll
open
withdraw- I'll
the
withdraw
public.
my motion. Go ahead.
And then we'll consider a motion.
Real quick, actually, last time that we held this, the first hearing, you asked us to hold our comments, and we did.
Okay.
So if anyone left, it wasn't because we were talking. And I did yield. I yield, and I asked my questions way after the
Okay,
public
well,
spoke.
Anyway,
So-
that's the best way to do it, so we'll do it that way from now on. So with that, I'm going to open the public hearing and ask if anyone would like to testify. Seeing none, thank you for coming. So we have David Marks and Susan Drew up first.
Oh, I get to sit here with you. Okay.
Calling in order of the list. Yeah, if anyone else needs to sign up, please do. Go ahead, David, you're up.
Chair Bernard and Commissioners, thank you for this opportunity. I come before you. My name's David Marks. I've lived in Clackamas County pretty near all my life and am finishing up on 50 years of running a business in Clackamas. And when I saw the slide, and I've seen it third time tonight, depicting no local funding mechanism in Clackamas County, where Multnomah County has 2 and Washington County has 4. If for no other reason than to create even a bit small in contribution, it is a local funding mechanism, and I want to give my full support behind that. I also bring the Clackamas County Business Alliance support for it. Personally, I would encourage you to be bold and do it by ordinance. The county needs it. The commission needs to take a bold step, and we'll all benefit from it. Having said that, I know there's many behind me that do not want to see another tax. When I first heard about this, there was conversation of it being $48. And I thought, wow, that would be great. So even though you've reduced it to 30, it's still a step in the right direction. And I would very much like to support you all in that.
Thank you. Susan?
Hi, I'm Susan Drew. I live out in Sandy, and I only became aware of this coming down the pike about a week or 10 days ago, or maybe a week, for whatever reason. So, but anyway, I have some friends who are, I guess they own multiple cars, and that kind of got me off on this Jag. And so I put together this in the form of a petition, but anyway, it's really kind of like a letter to express these, and I, including myself, 20 people signed it out there in Sandy and Eagle Creek and around. So I thought I'd just read it real quick, and thank you for letting us go. I said, we, the undersigned, oppose the vehicle registration fee that the county commissioners are now considering for the following reasons. One, while the county clearly needs a funding source to maintain our roads, the VRF, as drafted, places an inequitable, unfair burden on citizens who, for any number of reasons, maintain and use multiple vehicles. A person can cause wear on our roads only one vehicle at a time. Miles driven should be the basis for funding road maintenance. Whether this is a gas tax or another method of calculating road usage, it would be fairer than a $30 per year VRF on every vehicle owned by an individual. Also, as an aside, studded tires that cause greater road damage should be appropriately taxed or have mileage fees. Two, consider the elderly and others with fixed or limited incomes. $30 per year to maintain even a single vehicle, which they might use only on a weekly or less frequent basis, or someone to get to a job, is a substantial burden when it comes popping up there, and it's unfair because it doesn't represent road damage. Three, a gas tax would be more equitable. I mean, since I wrote this, I've read a lot more things, I don't know, but the commissioners state that they tried to pass a gas tax in 2016 and other times, but the voters rejected it overwhelmingly. Other counties and cities, including Sandy, have successfully passed gas taxes, and Clackamas County needs to make a renewed effort, conducting a campaign that educates voters and counteracts the negative advertising by fuel companies and gas station owners. And that's a very simplified view of everything, but anyway. And number four, our road funding or road maintenance funding systems must promote less wasteful practices such as combining car trips, maintaining gas-efficient cars, using public transit, good driving habits. The proposed VRF fails to address this aspect of public policy. It's like it isn't public policy. So, so I have my signatures on 3 different pages, and then I had a letter, an email from the Oregon Center for Public Policy that just came in today, and I wondered if I could just put it on the back of this.
Sure.
And I'm late with all this, but I hope it will be considered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin will take that.
Thank you. Can I look at it right now?
Greg DiLoretto and Brian Berkey.
Head back to you.
Burke. Go ahead, Greg.
Chair Bernard, members of the commission, I'm Greg DiLoretto, and I live in West Lynn, Oregon. I've lived in Clackamas County for over 40 years. And as noted earlier in testimony, I'm currently the chair of the American Society of Civil Engineers Committee on America's Infrastructure. Every 4 years since 1998, we've issued a report card on America's infrastructure. Our latest one was completed in 2017. The report card grades 16 infrastructure categories, and the grade in 2017 was a D+, and roads received a grade of D. We have a $2 trillion gap in this nation over infrastructure funding, and 1/2 of that is transportation. What does that poor grade mean economically? If we fail to invest in our infrastructure, by 2025, we can expect to see a loss in our gross domestic product of $3.9 trillion. That is equal to the current GDP of Germany. We can expect to see our businesses lose $7 trillion. And we can expect to lose in the year 2025 alone 2.5 million jobs because we are no longer economically competitive with the rest of the world. And right now, because of our poorly functioning infrastructure, American families are losing $3,400 per year in disposable income, or $9 a day, because they're spending that money on wasted time, gas, other infrastructure alternatives, repairs on their vehicles. Right now, Americans waste over 40 hours a year stuck in traffic. That's your 1-week vacation, stuck in traffic. Yet a recent study puts the Portland metropolitan community much worse. The recent study cited Portland as having the 10th worst congestion in our nation, and we're only the 25th largest metropolitan area. The study contends that Portlanders waste 116 hours stuck in traffic every year and lose up $1.4 billion. But you don't have to do a study to see what's out there. Now that I'm retired, I ask myself, how do people stand it? How do they sit in traffic every day? And using facilities that were built in the 1960s and the 1970s when we had 1 million people here and we're at 2.5 million. We can't afford to wait any longer to address this issue, and a $30 fee per year, or $2.50 a month, should be quite affordable. This is one citizen who supports the county's effort to address their part of the transportation problem in the Portland region. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
Good evening. My name is Brian Burke, and I live in Oregon City, and I'm here to give my full support to the vehicle registration fee. I want to share with you my background so you can understand how I support good and safe roads and how important they are to me. I've been a firefighter for 30 years and currently a battalion chief with Clackamas Fire. I also serve on the Traffic Safety Commission. This fee will maintain our roads, improve congestion, and save lives. 2 weeks ago, I witnessed a traffic safety device potentially save multiple lives. If you remember when Highway 213 was built between I-205 and Beaver Creek Road, there was no divider. And at some point, there was a divider. Somebody decided to fund that divider. Well, what I witnessed was a pickup truck going down 213 and run into that divider. That divider safely bounced him back into his own lane, and he didn't go on to where there was oncoming traffic. The reason I became initially involved in traffic safety years back was I became tired of seeing people die or become seriously injured in traffic crashes. I urge you to pass this fee with a portion of it going to road safety. The fee ensures all vehicles, including electric, which would not be covered with a gas tax, pay a small price to keep a road safe and in good condition. It keeps our county on track for drive to zero deaths by 2035. By passing this fee, you are investing in our future, just like those that funded the divider on Highway 213. Your choice, I believe, will save lives. Without this fee, we will not be able to maintain our roads as needed, congestion will increase, and funding for safety will be scarce. I thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Tiffany Turgetto and Janelle Lawrence. Tiffany, you're up first.
Hello. I've never been to one of these before. But living in Clackamas County all my life, my dad was involved in road maintenance for Clackamas County. And after some debate with my dad and some coworkers, I decided to come in and just talk about some ideas I had. I support the idea of having a fee and being able to support our roads with funding, but I think that we could do it maybe other ways, not just the vehicle registration for cars. For instance, when you go out and buy a new car, your tags have a longer time frame before you have to go back into DEQ. And I feel like everyone should be even. Just because your car is brand new or it's from the 60s, I think everyone should have to go through DEQ, not only for the amount of money that we would gain because those cars are on the road also, but you're also saving the environment from cars that really shouldn't pass DEQ, but they don't have to go because they're of the age of the vehicle, if that makes sense. Sorry, I wrote everything down. I think we should also put up the gas fee again for voters for the next election. I think that someone was talking about how citizens have that $ shock. And I think maybe that was a issue when that was up for votes. I feel like as a citizen, if we had more education or more knowledge on what exactly we're voting on, that things would pass easier. Knowledge is power. I also agree, I don't know what her name was, but a lady was talking about snow tires and studded tires. and other vehicles that put way more damage on the roads than just your everyday vehicle. Cars that are heavier, vehicles that use those chains and snow tires for the entire time that the law tells them they can when they don't need them on their vehicles. I also think, not that it's a statewide problem, but I feel like DEQ should be something that everyone in the state has to go through. Like if you were to go up to Salem where my in-laws live, they don't have to go through DEQ. They don't have to pay those road fees. And I just feel like there's other things that we can do, not just to gain that $30 a vehicle, but to make the money in a bigger pool so that we have more money to maintain our roads, not just this tiny $30 fee. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Commissioner Bernard, Commissioners. My name is Janelle Lawrence, and I'm the Executive Director of Oregon Impact. Oregon Impact provides programs to ensure that our children are riding safely on our roadways. Teens understand the consequences of impaired and distracted driving, and the adults in their lives are given the tools to help them reach that. I'm the chair of the Drive to Zero Advisory Committee, and I happily both work and live in Clackamas County. I'd like to thank you for all of your support and your strong support of traffic safety. We understand, as you do, excuse me, that increasing elements on our roadways to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes is valued by our citizens. The Drive to Zero Advisory Board supports the county's efforts of eliminating fatal and serious injury crashes by 2035, consistent with Oregon's traffic safety plan. There were 32 people who lost their lives last year in 2018 on our roadways. 32 people that did not arrive home to see their loved ones. That's when I meet the families at Oregon Impact, when it's too late. Trying to remember if they said, "I love you," before that person left and they're not going to see them again. How they're going to put their lives back together after they've lost a child in a crash. And how they're going to explain to a child that their parent isn't coming home, they're gone forever. 32 families that lost someone precious to them in a way that was perhaps preventable. Any additional investments in safety are strongly supported by the Drive to Zero Advisory Board. Clackamas County has been very proactive with low-cost safety measures, but it only gets us so far in our goal to eliminate these fatalities. And in bringing down fatalities requires considerable investments. Thankfully, HB 2017 is providing some safety funding up to $1.76 million, and the vehicle registration fee will bring the total to $2.26 million. This increase will allow the county to build added safety levels for our citizens. As you know, some of the worst crashes are where motorists leave our roadways. Additional shoulders and rumble strips will help, but they can cost up to $100,000 per mile or more. Nearly half of the county's 1,400-mile system is rural, so you can imagine how much all this work could potentially cost. Additional funding from the vehicle registration fee increases the number of people that will arrive safely home to their families each night, because all the road projects help safety, whether maintenance, capacity, or specifically for safety reasons. I appreciate your time this evening, and thank you for your ongoing support. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You. Next up is Lauren Hutnick and Rob Laster. Or Luster.
Guess I'm the lone wolf here. My name is Lauren Hutnick. I run a small trucking company out of Eagle Creek. And these two gentlemen, one evening, I ran them around in circles. I thought they were gonna throw me out or put a sock in my mouth. You know, after talking to these gentlemen, I was on the fence about this fee and this tax. But Chairwoman Schrader here has said a few things that were running the same line. A little background on me is I moved up here from California in 2016, and I was tickled pink to see what was up here. But in the last few years, I watched my proudness of this state slide. And you guys got to be very careful because Salem's put some very negative things out. And this HB 2020, this cap and trade, which I know like the back of my hand because I'm one of 11 people on 11 occasions called Mary Nichols out on the floor in her own hall. We just can't keep building and taxing and taxing. In California, they just keep throwing taxes and fees on it, and that's why they're paying almost $5 a gallon. Eventually, you guys put this fee on, you're, as Mr. Schrader said, it's going to create a negative downfall for you guys because Salem, as you all know, trucks pay a heavy use tax. But from what I'm finding out from these gentlemen, you guys get less than 1% of it. I pay $14,000 a year for two log trucks and 21 cents a mile for my low bed truck. But you guys get only 1%, and I do 99% of my work in Clackamas County. Why haven't you gone back to them and said, hey, give us more of that share? There's your money. It's Salem that's the problem, not you guys, not the fees. But again, I understand where you guys are coming from on these fees. But every month, every week, I'm signing checks to government agencies for this fee, that registration, this IFTA. When does it stop? You got to draw the line. And what's going to end up happening is the same thing happened down in California. You end up with gridlock, okay? The town of Rohnert Park, small community, back in the 70s, there was 4 ways in. Those were the only ways into that town, out of that town. They built that town up hugely. But they never asked the developers for infrastructure money. I asked Estacada, went to the mayor, went to the city manager. I said, hey, you guys got 1,600 new homes coming in. How much money do they give for infrastructure? 1,600 new homes on that freeway going in. That's 3,200 more vehicles in that town. These guys have got a problem now. I can barely get off of Hypo onto that road if I'm not out before 5 o'clock in the morning. And I'm 65 feet long. $0 was given by the developer, but he's going to collect how many millions of dollars? I think you guys might you have to go back and look at some of these developers and say, hey, you were bringing people in, we need to develop the infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have to,
For the record, we never threw, no.
Estacada, I have to check. They don't have system development charge for roads? That's crazy.
Deidre says they should. I know we do, so if a developer is doing a development in an unincorporated area, we do charge them for future road capacity.
Eagle Creek Highway has a bunch of houses coming in and up there. And there's no development or these gentlemen got their hands tied.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'll have to check with the mayor on that.
Deidre used to work there, and she said when she worked there, they had it. But anyway.
Okay, so go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Rob Luster. I'm in one of those positions that she spoke to, I'm retired on fixed income. I spent 30 years working for Multnomah County. I spent another 29 years working for the Air Force as a reservist. No doubt, safety is foremost in my mind as a prior law enforcement officer. Roadways are very important for both, as we've heard from the firefighter, as well as law enforcement, as well as all of us. However, I feel a issue of this magnitude needs to be put before the voters and let them decide what's best for themselves. I mean, as I said, I'm on a fixed income, so my wife and I both have a car, so we're looking at X number of dollars an additional 2 years. I don't get a raise like that. Also have a question as to who's going to manage the funding of this. It goes to the state, and then it comes to the county. Where's that money go? What fund does that guarantee that goes to the roads? How much is it going to cost to administer that money coming from the state to us? Over what period of time? Are they going to take a little piece of that for administration? I would if I was the state. So what are we actually going to benefit if you allow this to go forward as a decision made by the board? What part of, how many businesses might be forced to move out of Multnomah, or Clackamas County, excuse me, based on the fees as the gentleman that has logging trucks? How many of the car dealers on, I love McLaughlin Boulevard, not really, but are those people going to move because how much of that is going to be imparted to them for the registration of those vehicles? I just think there's more questions need be answered before anything is rushed in by a mandate by you folks. I think it should be put to the voters. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori Freeman Swanson and Tracy Hensley. Thank you. And Lori, you're up first.
Okay. Thank you very much. And is this on?
Yes.
Okay. Good to see all of you tonight. I'm coming in with sort of a simple message. I have great support for this VRF, and I think at $2.50 a month, I think we all deserve it, frankly. And I am very aware, because of things that I do with the county on little citizen committees and stuff like that, of how many years this whole program of educating the public to the problem and offering up different solutions, which has happened, and being open to people asking questions, either online or at local meetings. I mean, I think that the county has done everything but stand on their head to get this education out, pose the thought to people, and, get information in terms of, maybe we need to tweak it this way, tweak it that way. I would like to go forward. Frankly, I mean, it literally has been years and years and years of this discussion. And maybe some people missed it. I'm not quite sure how that happens, but it has not a secret. So I'm being sort of blunt, sorry about that. And I think sometimes this may sound real corny, but I think that certainly different inputs are really important for the county to make it be the best it can be. And also sometimes I think it's a little bit of a team sport. And I know that sounds corny, but that's my view. And I think we need to go forward. So there you go.
Thank you. Tracy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Bernard, Commissioners. First, I want to say for the record, while I am the chair of the Clackamas County Republican Party and an elected official in my hometown of Canby, I'm not here to represent either of those boards. I am speaking for myself. I have, actually, there's one lady at the beginning of the meeting that made a couple of my points, and if Les Poole has been in front of you once, he's been in front of you 1,000 times, so he probably has said everything that I would say, so I will just, being that I know what it's like to be on that side and hear everything 50 times, I will say the most important thing to me tonight, and that is that, excuse me, this $30 a year, which is actually $60 every 2 years, when you actually go to register, you're going from $112 to $172. And I just don't feel that going, and no matter how you look at it, I feel a fee is a tax, and taxing the people 54% more without their consent is just the wrong thing to do. And Commissioner Savas, you addressed the people's trust in the board. And in 2016, they said no to 3509 by a very large margin, and now this just seems and feels like an end around, and I don't see how you can go any other way but to put this before the voters. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Eugene Schoenheit and William Gifford. Eugene, you're up first.
Okay. I have 3 points I'd like to make here, and some of this is from what I had said last time I was here, but you recall that the 2016 election, basically, you asked the voters if this should come up for a vote, and basically the voters rejected. No, they passed that by 62%. Basically, 75% or 75,000 voters in Clackamas County gave you a directive. Now, if you're representing the people, you should be following their directive. Since that vote back there, you were taking in about $24 million in the base gas tax. Next year, you're going to be taking $5 million additional, and in about 7 years, you're going to be taking in $13 million additional over the base tax. And I think, Paul, you would understand this particular one. Right now, your priorities are to pave arterial and collector roads. And that's being paid for basically out of the $24 million. If you never had another gas tax, that's your priority, is to pay the arterial and collector roads. And what your gentleman here said was that the tax increase would be going for the new tax increase that you just now that you're getting would be going towards arterial and collector roads. He said that would be about $4 million. Well, if you take doing the math, if you take the $4 million off of the $24 million that you are already paying, assuming that you're, paying the same rate, you basically have $4 million more per year to spend on other projects, which, is not even stated. So that's my point.
Okay, thank you. William.
Mr. Chair and City and County Commissioners, my name is William Gifford. I live in Oregon City. The Oregon City Business Alliance had a presentation by the county regarding the vehicle registration fee. And for those of you who have attended those meetings, you understand that there's always a robust discussion afterwards. And although there was not a vote taken, I think it would be fairly fair to say that it was unanimous to support this, this vehicle registration fee. From my own perspective, I think that you have heard me say before that I'm very concerned that this commission is stuck in a bit of paralysis by analysis. This issue has been studied for years and years and years. You have a solution, you have the authority to do it. I would suggest that you do not shy away from that responsibility for fear of retribution, for fear of some people suing the county because this wasn't fair. You have the authority to do it. It's something that needs to be done. I haven't heard anyone say that the roads don't need repair. We need repair. We need a way of funding it. I have a distinct difference in my mind and in my vocabulary about the difference between a tax and a fee. This is not a tax, and you can't call it a tax. It's a fee, and there are differences for that. And I think if anything, my concern is that the amount of money that's being collected is not enough. I'm concerned that $30 was a convenient number. And you're right, I shouldn't just say $30, $65. Call it $2.50 a month. Whatever you call it, it's not going to generate enough money for us to get out of the hole that we're in, but it would be a good start. And one former president had a great quotation that I just have to use, is do something. If it works, do more of it. If it doesn't, do something else. But I'm asking you, please do something. And I think this vehicle registration fee, its time has come. Make it happen.
Thank you. Les Poole and Herb Chow.
Good evening, Les Poole. I'm going to use notes. It's pretty shocking for me. I was here at the original hearing, expressed a lot of concerns about public awareness. And through all of this process, correct me if I'm wrong, did we have a discussion item or a discussion on this issue at one of the hearings? I mean, prior to the public hearing. And where I'm going with that is that when I ask people that, most people don't know it. If I were doing the outreach for the county, and it's very easy for folks to get up here and tell you how to do your job, but I can promise you that if I was doing outreach for the county, my contact with the media, my attempts to get them here and to have a robust conversation rather than a product that isn't ready delivered on the 7th, it's still not ready. It's not. And you've heard from others that there was, it seems like it's a little all over the map. I'm the first person to say we have a problem. I'm the first one to be a road advocate. But I look at the amount of money that was in the roads budget and in the maintenance budget in the past. I see it was reduced. And to answer the big question about why I oppose this, and for those that have said, gee, this has gone on forever, it's time to do something, do anything. Well, that's already happened, and that's been discussed here in the presentations repeatedly. The state raised the gas tax 10 cents per gallon as part of HB 2700. That nickel per gallon that we're getting is generating 3.5 to 4 million a year. If we had a baseline maintenance budget prior to that of $2 or $2.5 million, not the 3 or 4 that it was before, but if we look at that $2 or $2.5 million number, and we add 3.5 or 4 million from that gas tax, we come out with a number that's going to get us closer to where we need to be. And the gas tax money is for maintenance, but it certainly doesn't have a lot of stipulations on what that means. I would also say that with regards to the types of roads and the type of work we do, I believe we need more sections paved than we need full upgrades. I understand that if you get to a point where you have to rebuild the whole road, you've got to do the complete upgrades and the cost goes through the roof. So the concern is we're hearing people asking you to move forward because the big concerns are about maintenance, yet I believe we have a vehicle to take care of that already. I really do. The last thing I would say is that with regards to 2016, and this goes back to citizen involvement, this goes back to goal 1. The citizens in May of 2016 passed an advisory vote, and that advisory vote to the county was that we consider some options, we look at some funding mechanisms. A short time later, the county made what I consider to be and what I often call a deal with the cities. And we suddenly had a gas tax on the ballot. I didn't see any discussion of any other options at the time, and the gas tax was a little too high and it went down in flames. If it were not for the tax increase granted by the state that ODOT and the county are both using on the roads, you wouldn't see the opposition you're getting here. I did submit some written testimony, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Herb?
I got 1 minute, 26, okay. Thank you, Commissioner Bernard, for your comment earlier on getting it to public testimony. I really appreciate that. Members of the Commission, Paul Savas, Commissioner Savas, thank you for allowing me to speak today here in front of you. You know, as a consultant by trade, we look at what is the problem, and then when we understand the problem, we then know what the solution can be. And the problem right now is really not the tax. The problem is the spending budgetary constraint disciplines. That's what the problem is. In the state of Oregon now, there is so much money that goes to not the things we need it to go to as a priority, like the roads. It goes to other things. If you're 6 months in the state of Oregon, you get a transgender surgery, free, taxpayer expense. Abortion on demand, free, taxpayer expense. Only insurance companies are paying for that. The problem is really like, this becomes like a show game scam 2.0, because we've seen this before. And let me give you some examples of how this has happened in the Democratic Party legislature. There was a short budget for the veterans to be budgeted. Now, in all fairness, this came from Kristen Hosfeld, a reporter, and she did a very good job in explaining this. So they had about approximately $11 billion. I think it was like $3 billion and $10 billion, so approximately $13 billion, I think, going into this. And when it was all said and done, what happened was the voters voted for 1.5% of the lottery money. Now, that would have bought 19.8 billion, and it would have bought the rest of it, which would have bought it well over the amount needed of 31 million. The ended result was the money got diverted out of the budget for the veterans, and they only ended up with 19.8 million, a short in the budget. The problem we're having today right now is, you mentioned it earlier about the not being able to do lumber, to retrieve lumber. Why did that happen? Because Oregon did not back its lumber industry. Oregon threw them under the bus. Meanwhile, the only person who's even tackled this problem is President Trump with the tariffs. Meanwhile, Canada's dumping product, while they're subsidizing up their dumping product in our markets. These things are not going to be long-lived, and those things in and of itself may start producing some more revenue for Clackamas County, because that's really a pretty large industry. So the long and the short of it is that I do not support this fee, because it ultimately ends up becoming a shell game scam. The money will be diverted. You'll just take it out of some other budget that you want to fund that people don't support, and there'll be less money for the roads. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you. Steve Adams and Lee Burgess.
We're going to be here for a while. I think so. Well, not too much time.
Steve, go ahead.
Yes, Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I am an employee of Wilsonville. I'm an engineer there, but I'm here as a citizen of Clackamas County. I've lived here for 30 years, and I'm also a current member of the Traffic Safety Commission. Last year I was the chair of the Traffic Safety Commission, and I'd like to share both a little bit of my experience as an engineer in Wilsonville and as a traffic safety person. In my experience, many people don't understand the cost of maintaining roadways. Several people here have expressed that they do have some understanding of it. In Wilsonville, we have a certain amount of money we get from the state, from the recent gas tax. We're fortunate, we're only a 50-year-old city, so 90+% of our roads are relatively new. Clackamas County has many older roads, and I know that if you don't maintain the roads on a regular basis, they fall apart, and you could spend a little bit of money now or a whole lot of money in the future. So if you don't maintain your roads now, you just create a problem for future generations, more cost. And I'm not here to say what's the best way to fund it. I think the vehicle registration fee is fine with me. I mean, I've been here 30 years. I don't have a opposition to it. I would encourage you to maintain part of that to go to road safety, because we do have a lot of problems in the county, safety areas. Joe Merrick and Christian is very familiar with this. Rob Sadowski is here. He's very familiar with this. And every time we bring up citizen concerns or we have a problem brought to the Traffic Safety Commission, ultimately it's funding. How do we get these funded? And some things are simple, as road signs are, and some things are difficult when you have to rebuild a intersection for grades or for the angle it intersects or whatever. So the more money that is applied to that would be improve the roads and also improve citizen safety, injuries, deaths, and we're all here trying to make a safer place. So I would encourage you to pass this tax. I would encourage you to maintain a certain percentage to go to traffic safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, or you, Steve. Lee. Go ahead.
I'll start off with the amount of vehicles that a lot of people does have. They can only drive, like the lady said, you can only drive one at a time. So, you know, if you have to pay an extra $60 every time you register all your other vehicles, that is a waste of money actually, but it's strictly unfair. And something else I was wondering about, does everybody here live in Clackamas County?
We have to.
Absolutely. Good. Good deal. I've been wondering that for a long time. But anyway, in Oregon City, in the Oregon City area, we pay $160.68 a year for road maintenance. Now, that's only for Oregon City, correct? Or is that Clackamas County?
Oregon City only, it's a utility fee.
Yeah, it's a utility fee, Oregon City. Wilsonville has one, Milwaukee has a little one, there's various cities do.
As far as I've been able to find out, all incorporated cities in Clackamas County has a tax for road maintenance within the city limits. So that kind of takes the miles away from the so-called 1,400 miles that the county has to maintain, because there is 335 urban miles.
No, that's 1,400 miles that Clackamas County has outside of cities.
No, it's 1,086 rural miles. I'm going according to the stats on the computer.
Okay. So 1,400.
We also have urban unincorporated miles. We maintain 1,400 miles of county roads, of which I think we have 40 miles of county roads actually within city boundaries that we do still maintain, but we maintain 1,400 miles.
Well, you better talk to the computer then, because the computer is wrong, apparently. I'm going by the stats, the printout from the computer. And as far as the condition of the roads, they're better off right now. Well, this shows 2014. They're actually better off than they were in 2000, 2005, and 95. They do drop off some, but they're still higher than they ever been. So as far as the condition of them. There was another thing about Clackamas County, or not Clackamas County, Multnomah County tried to pass, I think it was 11 different proposals for increasing registrations. There was only 2 of them passed. That's in the past number of years, I think since '96 or something like that. It's kind of hard to keep up with all the papers. But to add on to the registration fees, that's just not unfair. That's just not fair at all. I'm sure you can come up with some other way to accumulate some money. Like the dollar bill shows 42.06 for the schools. 18.71 cents out of every dollar goes to the county. The cities gets, I think, 12.16 cents out of the dollar. Fire is 11.21 cents out of the dollar. Urban renewal is 3.31 cents out of each dollar. They got a 1.9 for miscellaneous. 4.02 cents for community colleges. And service, who knows what that is, that's 4.52 cents out of each dollar. It just goes on and on and on. And another overhead down here is the assessor and taxation collector, 4 cents out of every dollar just for that.
I don't know what you're reading there.
Well, it's a graph that breaks down the dollar bill.
Yeah, essentially that information, I believe that information is provided by the county assessor. And it talks about the collection of property taxes, which then rolls into our general fund revenue. By statute, we cannot use that revenue for road maintenance purposes.
Actually, to say it both ways, really, is that state law does not allow property taxes to be spent on roads, and state law does not allow gas taxes to be spent on anything else but roads.
Yeah.
That's how the state law is structured.
The tri-counties, Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington County also has an additional 2% tax per gallon, other than what the rest of the state has.
That could be. There is a gas tax
There
in
is
Washington County.
additional 2 cents per gallon for the
I don't know what the
tri-counties.
amount is, but you're right. There is a gas tax
If
there.
that was raised to 3 cents, that would make sense, and that would probably.
Clackamas County does not have a gas tax.
I paid that gas tax in my trucking. It's an additional 2 cents a gallon tax on the tri-counties, Washington, Clackamas, and Multnomah.
Okay.
We don't get that revenue.
Okay. Well,
I don't know
We'd
where
love
it's
to see
coming
that information.
Yeah, if you could point us to that, we're not aware of it.
we need to finish up, though. You're 3 minutes over, but go ahead.
Well, everybody else has been over also, so I'm.
Well,
No, we can't sit here and argue, that's ridiculous, so. But anyway, there has been some good points made. Some of the points that I really enjoyed hearing, was the first person that got up, I think, was about people that's on a fixed income. They're living month to month on their income, on their Social Security, and with the inflation, it's going downhill real fast. They still need to be able to drive and get to the stores, the doctors, the hospitals, wherever they need to go. You got to take in the schools. School kids have cars. They drive to and from school. Sure, their parents foot the bill for them mostly. But there's also college kids that go into college. They have cars, and a lot of them live in California or somewhere else. So, of course, their cars are registered somewhere else anyway, probably, but for California. But anyway, it'll just create a hardship on too many people, and I think if Clackamas County wants to do it properly, they'll figure another way to take care of the problem.
Okay, thank you. Myra A., it says, and Thelma Hagemiller. Hi, Myra.
Good evening, Board. My name is Myra. I've lived in the Clackamas County for 27 years. And I have a question because, okay, ever since I moved here, registration has gone from like $10 to $30, from $30 to $54, from $54 to $86, and now this last little hike in 2018 to $112. So for the gentleman here at ODOT, don't you get that revenue from DMV? Because every time you go to renew and you ask what that money's for, they say it goes to the roads. So now you want to put $60 on top of that, so you're going to get that extra $26 we just had to pay on top of 60 more?
You want that on the distribution?
So ODOT, we work for the county. ODOT's the state agency, and so the money you currently pay, the 112, the county, that doesn't go just to the county. So that goes, half that money goes to ODOT, to the state. 30% of that is split by all the counties, and of that 30%, Clackamas County gets about 10% of that. So it's about it's actually 3%. You had mentioned it's about 3% of the total. Yeah. Oh, that might be. I'm not as familiar with that weight mile. So a small portion of the 112 you already pay comes back to the county. The difference is the amount of the one that the board is considering. All of it would come back to the county.
Okay, because right now, sitting in the DMV, and you're just sitting there waiting to renew your tags, and the angry people don't want to pay that extra money, and then you go impose this extra $60. I've seen people from Washington County that now they're paying that $172 to renew for 2 years, and they're angry. They're angry because they said they did not get a say in it. It was like Multnomah County. They didn't get a say. It's like, boom, it was there, you got to do it. And so I appreciate the fact that you guys will allow us to come and have our say and our input. And I'm just like, I don't ever want to see angry people sitting in there when I'm trying to renew my tags because of this. I mean, sometimes it's comical. I'm just not even going to lie about that, but I feel for them. And when you have veterans that say, I only get this amount of money, okay, I want to try to pay for theirs too, and I can barely afford what I'm trying to pay for. So it would be nice if it could be put to a vote for the people. Thank you very much.
Thelma.
Chair Bernard, Commissioners, my name is Thelma Hagen Miller. I reside in unincorporated area of Oak Grove. I am one of those senior citizens on a fixed income. I own 2 registered vehicles, only me driving. But I still support the vehicle registration fee ordinance. And what I'm here tonight to urge you to do is to establish a citizen advisory committee for road maintenance. You do not have one at the current time, as far as I know. I brought that up the other night. So I think that having a citizen advisory committee brings a little more trust to the overall spending of the dollars, which may also help satisfy some of the people that want to take this and refer it to a vote of the people. Right now, I usually support going to a vote of the people. You've all heard me on that subject, but I think we voted and voted and voted and voted, and we still don't have any money in there to maintain our roads properly. In addition, I encourage everybody that's here tonight and everybody out there in TV land to think about the safety issue that the road maintenance crew does that has the most impact on my driving as a senior citizen, and that's the striping along the sides and down the center of the road. As far as I'm concerned, that's more important than congestion to my safety in driving home on a winter night when it's raining out. And so I urge you to go forward with this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that, Tom Wilkes. Thanks for coming.
All right, glad you put this together. Just while I was sitting here, I have a few questions I'd like to ask you guys. Do the roads?
Yeah, please.
Number one, you stated earlier that right now you have the existing money to continue to maintain the roads that we have. The gentleman on the
To
left.
maintain the busiest roads that we have, not the local roads, not the, there's a few hundred miles of local roads we have, the ones that generally connect people to their driveway.
Such as local subdivisions that within the subdivision,
In
trying to
the
get
urban
them
area, yeah.
from there to
Yeah.
the road to put them on the arterial, correct?
Yeah, in the rural area, it's less obvious, but it's a lot of just the less traveled roads.
Right. I live out in rural Beaver Creek. All right, so stated earlier, you have to get everybody in and out of town. You've got the money to continue to maintain it as we have it right now. You stated that earlier. Outside of, you got roads crumbling in the subdivisions.
Yeah, more or less.
Okay. So the vehicle registration fee, you're wanting to use that for the new capital developments, correct?
Oh,
Funding.
so the first, we're short on the money that we need to maintain roads.
Okay.
All roads.
Okay.
And then we have no money for local roads. And then, okay, now I forget what your question was.
But
All right, so.
You ask a question.
So the vehicle registration fee was to be used for capital improvements.
It's for both.
You made the statement, you have money to maintain the roads to get people in and out.
That's what I thought I heard you say
I-
earlier.
But,
Yeah.
but the nuance is the fact that the capital is associated with getting those people in and out. It's turn lanes, it's intersection improvements, that's all those things associated. That are capacity improvements that then provide a safe system for folks to move to, through, and from throughout the county.
Correct, that would be part of the capital improvements.
Yeah, but part of it also was maintaining local roads and doing safety improvements.
Correct, all right, fair enough. Okay, so you talk about roads that, are crumbling down, gravel roads, say, and, further out, or excuse me, asphalt roads, that once they get to a certain condition, that the best thing to do would be either you're paying X amount of million to repave it, or grind it up, run a gravel road. My question, again, for the road crews, would be roads such as that don't have, you guys don't have logging due to other circumstances. That was where you were getting a lot of road funding. Yes, supporting your industry using the stuff wouldn't be a bad idea. But if you're not using them, I run on gravel roads all the time. And so what I'd like to know is if you went ahead and ground up the old asphalt road that isn't on your list to go repair, grade it, and run your grader every so often down there to smooth it out. Could that save you enough money for other improvements on more congested roads to do your safety improvements, your capital improvements? I have no problem running on a gravel road. And I could run, you could take my road, my wife would kill me because our clothes would get dusty, but to feed Beaver Creek Road, we've got 1 mile of asphalt. That's $100,000 per mile, is that correct?
For what?
For new shoulders and.
Oh,
to
to
do
just,
a
to
road.
just do shoulder work, yeah.
Okay, all right. Mary, that's my question.
Yeah.
Could you go ahead and pick roads instead of, making it to where now I can run, real fast on a nice asphalt road out in the country? Or now I'm gonna keep it at, 45 and run a gravel road?
So I don't have an analysis in front of me to show you. In general, people don't want us to crumble their roads back into gravel. And you mentioned the word dust. I only know when we do construction projects, and we are on gravel, we get tons and tons of complaints about it. So theoretically, could we save some money by just doing that? I would imagine, but I don't have any kind of analysis to show it.
I understand that, so that's why I'm just bringing it up.
I also want to acknowledge the fact that we are not the transportation maintenance people.
Oh.
We have amazing people down in transportation maintenance that do that work, and they'd be insulted that you called us.
They're a lot better at it than we
Yeah,
are.
exactly.
All right. But you're interacting with them, and you know where the funds need to go. I think that pretty well
I'd just like to add some, I used to collect rocks up in mountains above Estacada where there's all kinds of paved roads or gravel roads, which aren't our roads. They're old logging roads and stuff. We don't maintain those or spend any money on those roads. Do we have many gravel roads in Clackamas County where people live on?
So I don't have them by name. I think we've got about 4 miles
4
of the 1,400 are gravel.
So don't
It's
pave
a very
those.
low number. I mean, some counties have hundreds of miles of them. They're mostly in eastern Oregon.
Okay, so I guess the final question is, if our county infrastructure, as far as business and people living here and paying just general taxes by working and living here, if we can't support it, the paved road infrastructure, could we feed them off gravel roads onto your good Beaver Creek roads, your Springwater roads and such, your arterials? And then at the time that you guys build up the Clackamas County tax base through people that work and live, then go ahead and repave it.
Again, we can't use tax dollars from the increase in value in property tax. By state statute, we can't use that for road purposes. I'm looking back at Joe Merrick when I say this statement. I want to make sure it's accurate. He's the head of our safety action committees and our plans. One of the concerns that we have with the conversion, we can do anything. I mean, yeah, you could convert a lot of our asphalt roads back to gravel. One of the concerns we would have with that is the safety of those roadways, because while it would reduce our maintenance cost, it would increase the liability and the safe environment we're trying to provide for our citizens in Clackamas County. And I'm looking back here to make sure your head's shaking the right way. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I just want to make sure I was accurate with that statement.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so with that, we'll close the public hearing and go to our commissioners for discussion. And first up is Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So 42 years ago, the citizens said put it up for a vote. And they put it up for a vote, and it didn't pass. And 7 times since then, the citizens said put it up for a vote, and it didn't pass. And here we sit today, and we have no local source of funding to maintain our roads, and they are getting worse and worse and worse every single year. So at some point, the people that are elected to public office have to make a responsible decision to take care of the infrastructure that has been paid for by citizens in the past and make sure that the next generation has an infrastructure that works for them. The options that we have are limited. We don't have all the money in the world, and we can't just move money from one fund to another fund and play games with it. The one thing about this is that it is probably one of the few areas where we can absolutely guarantee that the money is going to be spent precisely on what you're going to be paying for. It's going to be spent on Clackamas County roads. We can't spend it anywhere else. So that is probably one major thing that makes this probably the most responsible way we could approach this. People have commented about DEQ. We have no control over DEQ and what they do with their money, period. I somewhat agree with people sometimes about Salem and what goes on there and how they do things with financing and whatnot like that. But again, we're very, very limited voice in Salem in terms of what we do or don't control. We have a responsibility to this infrastructure, the single most valuable public asset that the citizens of this county own. It is our responsibility to make sure that that asset stays in good shape, not only for today, but for the future. And it is utterly irresponsible to not make this decision, given the history that we know from 1986 until today. I've been in this position before where people who were elected to public office wanted to be either nice to their neighbors or they wanted to go to higher public office. And so they made the promise, we'll not raise your fees, we'll not raise your taxes, you can call it whatever you want. And in some cases, they moved on to higher office. I'm not going anywhere other than whether I get to keep this job or not, and that will obviously be up to the citizens of this county. But I won't be irresponsible. So, in my opinion, given the history that we have faced since 1986 at least, it would be an abdication of our responsibility as elected officials to not do this. I don't expect anybody in this room, myself included, to like it. I don't want any more money taken out of my pocket for any reason than is absolutely necessary. But the fact is, this is absolutely necessary. And it's irresponsible if we don't take this action. It's 8 cents a day. It's a Starbucks cup of coffee. That's about it. So, yeah, just you do the math. It's 8 cents a day. So, there was another comment that was made about using the gas tax. I just noticed it in my notes. I would remind people that electric vehicles don't pay gas tax, but they do get the benefit of a paved road. So this is one way of capturing that revenue and having them pay their fair share of the maintenance of the roads. I have 3 automobiles. It's going to cost me $180 every time I register mine. So I understand. When I'm no longer here, I'll be on a pretty restricted retirement income. So it's not as if I'm not sensitive to what this means to people on fixed incomes. At my age of 73, I've been on a fixed income. I know I'm going back to a fixed income, but it's still the responsible thing to do. So, Mr. Chairman, that pretty much concludes my comments. I hope that we do make the responsible decision.
Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate everybody testifying tonight, and I appreciate all of the emails, the Facebook comments, the conversations that have occurred with this discussion. I am very sensitive to the concerns raised, especially sensitive to the concern for individuals on fixed incomes. I know that $30 every year, which is $60 for 2 years, is a very, very heavy lift. And we talk about, you can think in some ways, well, people have cars, they need to pay for them. But I and my colleagues, many of us just did the homeless count, and we talked to people that their car is their house. They live in their car. So I don't like that this is a regressive fee. This fee is going to disproportionately affect people that have lower incomes. So I'm going to ask the question. When we first talked about this at C4, I went around the room and was kind of whispering to people. I was just there as an observer. I didn't have a vote, didn't have a say. So I didn't step out strongly in this, but I kept whispering to folks, can't we, advocate that it be progressive, somehow be progressive? Or if cars are more expensive, or they're new cars, or they're electric cars, or they're a Tesla, they pay a whole bunch. Can't we make this a progressive tax, a fee in a way so that the people that are really struggling, or people on fixed incomes, don't have to pay the same amount? And so I'm just going to ask that question to see why we cannot do a vehicle, because we can't, as I understand it, but I would like to know why that is.
We're pulling in a ringer for that one,
Okay.
so give us a moment.
Now introducing Nate Boderman.
Good evening, Commissioners. Nate Boderman, Assistant County Counsel. I don't have the statute in front of me, but there is, off the top of my head, I do recall there being restrictions on specific vehicles, exemptions, and there isn't the ability, again, from my recollection, and we can get you a specific answer on this, to create different categories. Beyond that, there's the practical limitation that we're relying on DMV to administer this. And so even if you adopt an ordinance, we still have the additional step of negotiating an agreement in an IGA with DMV to administer and to collect this. And so whether they would want to take that extra step of administering a system like that would be partially up to them as well. So that's the best I can do for you off the top of my head. We can get you a specific answer on the state statute, but those are, I thought it worth mentioning the additional practical limitation of the DMV as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I also really appreciate the comments from the public and in the written testimony about, well, why don't we do a fee based on how much you drive? I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Why don't we do a greater fee for electric vehicles because they aren't paying the gas tax? Why don't we do these things? I love the comments about, well, why don't we charge an extra fee for those that really tear up the roads, more of a studded tire fee, more of fee for trucks that are using the roads. All of these ideas, I think, are excellent. I really appreciated the testimony tonight that with the gentleman that is the right there that says I pay this much more for my your logging truck, correct? So there are extra costs to go towards infrastructure for folks that use the roads more. So with all of that, we're still faced with the decision of, well, what do we do now with where we need to go for tomorrow? And we do really need to address this. And I wish there were better answers. In some ways, I think the state should give us more flexibility, and we should be able to look at some of these uniquenesses to create more equity, but it's a real concern that I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I'll just be brief. When the legislators gathered around to do HB 2017, they actually addressed some of those issues. So I think they actually have a higher vehicle registration fee for electric vehicles, for example. Hybrids. They added a fee for bicycles that upon purchase they would pay a sales tax, and they did a number of things. Certain states have a higher vehicle registration fee for vehicles of higher value, call it a luxury type tax, but you know that's more equitable. So for us today, I just want to say there are advantages of the VRF, I believe, and I think there are advantages for the gas tax. So those people that have a lot of vehicles like myself, I'll pay more, and you're right, I can only drive one at a time. But I'm in a position where, for now, I can afford that. In the future, it's not clear whether or not those people on retirement will be able to afford that. Supporters that people that are here today, they're in strong support of us just doing this. My concern is that perhaps they don't understand the likelihood of this being referred to the voters. And I would like to be certain and have a surety that by doing this, we're done and we collect the fee. But that's really my gut instincts, and I don't think that's the case. I think it's going to get referred. So therefore, I was hoping that this would be something put together, assembled in a way that the voters could say, hey, I like what you're doing here. I can see what you're going to be spending my dollars on, and something that when the ballot measure was on their kitchen table, they would vote yes on it. But I don't think it's ready for prime time. I don't think it's been fully baked to that level. That's one of my concerns. The other factor that we haven't really reconciled is that 3-478 was the May 2016 ballot, which the voters said and agreed 62%, 60% that they wanted to have a say in this. We haven't reconciled that quite yet amongst ourselves and to the voters and trust is a big deal. On the other hand, another factor of this is that, yeah, it fixes the problem to some degree, but does it really fix the problem? And I think the questions that were teased out today, that there would still have a remaining $3 to $5 million gap We could do this, and when we did it and it was implemented, we would still be able to say, we still have a shortfall. So this is not, it's not a solution for maintenance. It's 500 more thousand for safety, but we still have a shortfall. And granted, it gives us more money, and I think that's important. I am supportive of finding the revenue and putting something out that will meet those needs. And frankly, this doesn't get us there. This is just halfway. This is just half the amount of funds we need to do the job. And I think that's important. So to Commissioner Humberston's point, I don't want to abdicate my responsibility, and I don't think he wants to abdicate his responsibility either. So we need to do the job, and doing half the job is not enough. I want to do the full job. So whatever that is, and however that's put together, however that's assembled, is going to have to be something that ultimately the voters probably approve.
Martha.
Well, I said a lot earlier, but I would like to point out that I've been here for quite a while, and I've been through iteration after iteration. I thank everybody for coming as well. I appreciate what Commissioner, my colleagues have said so far, particularly understanding what it's like to be on a fixed income. I want to thank Thelma in particular, because you've been here longer than I have, and we're finally at the point where, you know, we can move forward with this, and I am ready to make I think for me, a very hard vote to do this. However, I want to caution everyone. I do think that it's highly likely it would be referred. So I would like to ask Mr. Madcore, what would that look like? Just what would that process be?
It'd be 90 days, 8,000 signatures.
Okay, and then what would when would the vote occur? Do you
At
know?
the next available election.
Okay, which would be?
After the signatures are collected.
So what
Does
would
it
be?
take us probably to,
September, November?
yeah, September, November,
Okay.
yeah.
So it'd be reasonably quickly, should
would
a
be.
referral, a remonstrance and a referral happen. I do think it's likely. The only concern I will say to my colleagues and to everyone out there, I do recognize, you know, and I am prepared to move forward with this. It's probably one of the hardest votes I've made, I think, since I've been here. I do recognize, however, and I am very worried about what I've heard in terms of sticker shock for our citizens. There are things going on in Salem that I worry about. They're talking about perhaps another 16 cents additional gas tax, or possibilities of the gas tax going up because they're looking at a climate change piece. I'm worried about Metro. They're looking at a bond for infrastructure as well. And sometimes we are aligned with them, but there are a lot of times we're not aligned with what they want to do with, you know, that kind of infrastructure dollars. And also, I know that we're going to be looking at infrastructure building with a courthouse. So I just want to caution us. We'll move forward. But there's a lot of other things on our plate that we have to be very cognizant that if this is our priority, then this should be our priority. And other priorities may fall by the wayside because they're from other government entities, and it may be that our citizens can't support some of those other issues if we move forward with this. So anyway, that's what I have to say. I want to make it clear. I do recognize that it's hard for people to come up with additional dollars. I'm single. I live alone. I've got my own. I'm lucky I have a job, but I know what it's like to try and. My car died. Have a new car now that I have to make payments on. I'm not looking forward to spending any additional dollars, but I will do so. So, well, thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two final comments. One is there's an expression I heard a few years ago. It's don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If we wanted to solve every single one of our transportation problems, we might be able to triple or quadruple the amount of money we'd be asking people to go. And I suspect that that would not fly very well, let alone the $30 a year we're talking about right now. This will make a dent, a pretty decent dent, in the issues that we have. It's not perfect, but it does move the ball forward. To put it a little bit in perspective, in Gallatin County, Montana, the home of Montana State University, the per capita income is $59,000 a year. In Clackamas County, that per capita income is $72,000 a year. They have a quarter of the population, and they pay $136.44 a year as a county fee. We're asking for $30 a year. And this is a much poorer county in another state. In 27 states in this country, you don't just pay a road fee for putting your car on the road. You also pay a personal property tax. In the state of Kansas, for a car that's about 6 years old, you can pay $400 a year in personal property tax to put your car on the road, along with a vehicle registration fee and gasoline taxes. So, again, I'm certainly not here to suggest that this is a pleasant thing to do. I don't like doing it, but it is only $30 a year. It's only 8 cents a day, and it is the responsible thing to do. I would finally comment that commercial trucks, such as logging trucks, are not including in this. This is passenger vehicles and motorcycles. And for those who wonder why we can't do the large trucks, it's because they pay a weight mile fee, and so that is out of our authority to tax or put a fee on in any way, shape, or form. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
God, I get to say something. So years ago, there was a tax for studded tires, and I agree they should put that back on. They took it off because they went from steel to aluminum studs, which supposedly don't cause as much damage, but they do obviously cause damage. Anyone driving down the road can see that. There wasn't the ability to enact a vehicle registration fee until a number of years ago, when then, who's the mayor? Who's the mayor of Portland?
Charlie Hales.
Charlie Hales was the Multnomah County Commissioner, and they had a bridge problem, and he enacted or went around the county, and they enacted or worked with the legislature, and the legislature made it so that counties could enact it. And if you remember right, we did. We enacted it to help pay for the Selwood Bridge. That was referred to the voters. Now, 70% of the traffic across the Selwood Bridge comes from Clackamas County. So it seemed like it was a reasonable thing to do. But the voters, somebody referred it to the vote, and we lost. But one of the comments made was that if this money was spent in Clackamas County, they would support it. And that's what we're doing tonight. This money will be put in a separate account, will be tracked, and I think Thelma had a good idea. We are using C4, by the way, to help us distribute some of the money, but it'd be a good opportunity to use C4 to look at, track what we're doing, and to, since C4, Clackamas County Coordination Committee, just in case, they could communicate back to their community what we're doing. Are there suggestions on where we should be spending that money in their area? They have their own money, which they'll get 40% of this. And the other thing is that I'm fairly certain that all cities, I know Milwaukee did have a list of projects that they did. I think it's called a transportation system plan in Milwaukee, just like most communities have, that they spent the money specifically there. We have been discussing this for 20 years at least. 42. I have been discussing this for 20 years at least. And it was only recently that Clackamas County Coordination Committee voted to support a vehicle registration fee unanimously. Now, we got lots of letters from cities that said, yes, we support it, or put it to a vote. We had lots of business groups that said, we support this. We've had some of them here tonight. We can't, you know, we would, if it were possible to solve this problem by, you know, let's say go to $60 a vehicle. I don't think the voters or the people in Clackamas County would ever even consider supporting that, and I wouldn't either. We have an opportunity to do more, but we've decided to do what we thought was fair. I bought a Starbucks coffee today. I know it's not really that important, but it was $4 and something because I drink soy mochas. I have
black coffee.
I have 4 cars.
Those are expensive.
4 cars. One I drive maybe once every 2 to 3 months. I have a pickup truck for my farm, my ranch, excuse me, that I drive when I need to pick up lumber or cow food. So there, you know, I'm going to be spending money. The gas tax. Cars like I have a Prius, which gets about 40 miles to a gallon. I don't spend nearly the gas tax or buy as much gas as other people. Electric cars wouldn't pay any, so this is more fair. And I totally agree that it would be great if we could do it the value of the vehicle. They actually are now with the Senate Bill 2017 taxing when you buy the car. But I don't know where that money goes. Some of it, I guess, is spread out across the state. But the federal government isn't supplying any money anymore. And when they do, they put so many demands on it. Lake Road, for example, in 2009, I brought back $3 million from Washington, D.C. I don't know. I wasn't mayor. It was 8 years later. They hadn't even done the road yet. And by the time they did the road, it was $7 million. So, I mean, because all the demands the federal government puts on it. And now, from when it used to give 80%, the federal government, they're talking about 30%. And we have to come up with the 70%. So they're just less and less coming from other people. And like Ken said, we have a responsibility to future generations. I one time suggested we let our roads go to gravel. You can buy a machine that will grind those things up and spread the gravel out really nicely, and we got in all kinds of trouble. There are roads that certain communities have let go to gravel. And there are some roads that probably should go to gravel, but we don't have many of those. Actually, if you drive through Portland neighborhoods, you can drive on all the gravel you want, in many of them. But, you know, I think this is a reasonable thing to ask the citizens of Clackamas County to support. And I'm not that sure that somebody's going to go out and refer it. I hope they don't. I met with Les for lunch, and I gave him some material and asked that he would consider it. He's considered not supporting it. That's fine. That's up to him. But we had a good lunch anyway. Paul?
Yeah, just a question, understanding that, you know, after this is approved here tonight, which it looks like it will be, and we walk away with still a $3 to $5 million shortfall, knowing we will have inflation, and knowing that, like you said, the dollar is a $3 million project. A couple of years later, the price of asphalt, that gap will probably grow to some degree. My question to you is, what do you foresee for filling that gap?
Well,
do you have an idea?
I think Ken said it best. We can't solve everything. There's a lot of gaps in a lot of things. We can't solve it all. All we can do is protect as much of that valuable asset as we possibly can, and with this we can. We can't solve it all. That's how I feel.
So we don't have really a plan for that that gap.
Well, actually, I'd like to make a commitment that if that gap is filled, if the state or the federal government comes up and says, hey, we'll fill that gap, I'm willing to take the vehicle registration fee off in Clackamas County. But until I hear that, Washington County did their VRF when they said to the state of Oregon in House Bill 2017, if you give us enough money to maintain our roads, we will not enact a vehicle registration fee. Well, House Bill 2017 did not, so they enacted the vehicle registration fee. It's just like I-205. They funded every project in the state but I-205 in Clackamas County. Not that this money's going to I-205, but, you know, we got to take care of ourselves. We have a responsibility. And like Ken said, you know, we frankly, I don't think we have a choice but to take care of the biggest investment Clackamas County citizens own. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we read the ordinance by title only.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we read the ordinance by title only. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. With that, we'll ask the clerk to read the ordinance by title only.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is ordinance number 01-2019, an ordinance adding Chapter 7.07 Vehicle Registration Fee to the Clackamas County Code.
With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, it has been moved, excuse me. Where am I here?
The bottom dark.
I think the bottom got cut off. Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt ordinance number 01-2019, adding Chapter 7.07 Vehicle Registration Fee to the Clackamas County Code.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance number 01-2019, adding Chapter 7.07 Vehicle Registration Fee to Clackamas County Code. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
A motion passes 4-1. Let me see, now it's supposed to, well, with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Thank you. And thank you all for coming.
All right, on tonight's consent agenda, Mr. Chair. We have Health, Housing, and Human Services approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Trail School District for the Cedar Ridge Fitness Center. Approval to apply for a continuation grant for the Oregon Department of Transportation 5311 Rural Formula Funds for operations funding for the Mount Hood Express. Approval to apply for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration grant for funding to prevent the onset and reduce progression of underage drinking and substance abuse in children. Under elected officials of previous business meeting minutes, approval of amendment number 1 with Dial Temporary Help Services, Inc., employs overload for payroll services for election board workers for the clerk's office. Under administration, approval of 2 intergovernmental agreements with the state of Oregon relating to funding for a future county courthouse. Under community corrections, approval of an amended intergovernmental agreement between community corrections and the state of Oregon Department of Corrections for an application program interface. Under our Water Environment Services, approval and adoption of the Water Environment Services 5-year Sanitary and Surface Water Programs Capital Improvement Plan, fiscal year 18-19 to fiscal year 22-23. Approval of a public improvement contract between Water Environment Services and North Star Chemical for the chemical supply. Approval of public improvement contract between Water Environment Services and Two Rivers Terminal, LLC for the chemical supply. Approval of an amendment with Kennedy Jinks Consultants, Inc. for the Tri-City Hypochloric Disinfection Project. And that concludes tonight's consent agenda.
Do any commissioners want to remove or pull an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, Motion carries. With that, we're on to county administrator updates.
Thank you, Chair Bernard. I have a couple of really good things to tell you tonight that I really want to share with you, even though it is late. First, I'd like to relay some very good news from our Public Health and Health Centers divisions of Health, Housing, and Human Services. Despite the recent school cancellations due to weather, staffers were able to produce a very successful vaccination process ahead of the state's exclusion deadline, which was earlier this week. Some numbers for you. Over 300 schools and daycares were contacted for immunization records for their students and children. 1,768 letters were sent to students and children advising them of their immunization status. And this past Tuesday's clinic, 97 kids checked in and received from 1 to 6 injections apiece. I wouldn't want 6.
We sent all those letters?
H3S did.
Wow.
Yes, we did. Further, the county also placed their nurse in Colton for an immunization day. The nurse reached out to 14 additional children who would have been excluded from school and performed their immunizations. The school district was very excited for our collaboration, and that community has limited access to health care. So I think that's a really great success story. Next, I'd like to share some very exciting news from our juvenile department. Director Christina McMahon will have an article published in next month's edition of Juvenile and Family Court Journal. It's a nationally peer-reviewed academic journal that covers juvenile and family justice. Christina's article is titled, Juvenile Justice in Oregon, Balanced and Restorative Justice in Action. The article does feature Clackamas County, demonstrating our status as the state's leader when it comes to balance and restorative justice. This is quite an honor for Christina to be in that kind of a journal, so I thought you should know that. Yes, and finally, as always, more accolades for our staff from Department of Transportation and Development. Senior Planner Martha Fritzy received thanks recently for doing what our planning staff does so often, going the extra mile to help resolve issues related to various dwellings. Resident Cindy H. wrote to Martha, "Thank you for your listening skills, understanding, and professionalism. I really appreciate all the time you spent on this project and how respectfully you dealt with all involved." So kudos to Martha. Thanks to her for literally being complimented on one of our core values, professionalism. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Commissioner Communications, Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we've all communicated quite a lot this evening, so I want to keep mine very, very short. I did have a chance on Tuesday to share with you the homelessness research delegation that I was on in Los Angeles, and also the Justice Reinvestment Conference that I was in last Thursday, which is why I missed the business meeting. The takeaways from those two events, especially the intersection of our criminal justice system and homelessness, is that homelessness costs the taxpayers a whole lot. At this time, we have a lot of convergence and really good thinking on how can we reduce these costs and shift our dollars so that it makes sense for everyone. And I'm really happy to be part of that with the rest of you in moving us forward in this very important policy initiatives.
Thank you. And Commissioner Schrader.
I just want to thank my colleagues for helping out at the state of the county. I know that I had a death in the family, so I was gone. I kind of missed the last of a generation of an Italian family. My uncle died at 91, so I got to spend some time out there. It was sad and happy at the same time, and so I was not able to be at the state of the county, but I'm glad that everybody did a good job with that. I'm going to move really quickly because I'm pretty tired today to go to, should I do the word or the arts and activities?
Arts first.
Okay, let's do the arts and culture activities in the county. Historic Oregon City presents author Steve Arndt, Saturday, February 23rd, noon, end of the Oregon Trail. Interpretive Center, Oregon City, Steve Arndt, author of the series Oregon Ghost Towns A through Z, will present on his newest book, Oregon, Uncommon Facts and Unique Information. Clackamas Repertory Theater presents Maytag Virgin, Sunday, February 24th, 6:30 p.m. at the Feckin' Irish Brewing Pub in Oregon City. The latest bar theater presentation from Clackamas Rep. Ticket price includes your first beverage. Story: when school teacher Lizzie meets neighbor Jack in the year following her husband's tragic death, a new relationship is formed. This witty play explores what it means to move on while still honoring and remembering the people and things that came before. Also, let's see, Lakewood Center is going to be starting with the comedy Taking Steps, playing from March 1st to April 7th, and Lake Oswego Reads is going full swing with all kinds of conversations and activities surrounding the book the whole community is reading. So, okay, word of the week, enthrall. Enthrall, verb to hold spellbound. Did you know? To enthrall is to captivate or mesmerize. Most performers in library books that are truly inspiring usually enthrall us from beginning to end. And thanks to Kevin for doing this every week for me. Okay?
Great, thank you. Paul?
Yep. Just want to brief, knowing that it's been a long night already, just want to kind of let people know that a lot of us here are working one way or another in some fashion on the housing crisis, and it is a very broad topic, and my focus and work is really about policies that will help keep the cost or bring the cost down of housing, permanent housing, and provide opportunities for people for home ownership and get people, working families that are homeless, living out of a van or living out of a car and getting them into a home. I think the American dream is something that we can't lose, and we can't keep on continuing down the path that we're currently at with policies that drive the cost up. I just don't see how a young college student, a millennial who's 30 years old, or frankly, those of us who are 40 in professional careers, a lot of us can't afford a $400,000 or $500,000 market value home on a 30-year mortgage. It's just not feasible. The cost to tear down existing housing and to build something different is more money than the house you tore down. So we have to ask the question, how do we get housing as affordable as possible? And I think we have to look hard at our policies. And that's what I'm working on this week.
Great. So next week, Gary Schmidt becomes oh, sorry. Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This week I went to the Lake Oswego Chamber of Commerce and gave a presentation to them, as I did to about 8 or 9 other community groups, about the vehicle registration fee. Explained the who's, what's, and whys of that. Did my 5th ride-along with a local police department. This time it was the Lake Oswego Police Department. It's been interesting to talk with their officers and find out what common problems they have from city to city and how they work with our sheriffs. I will say that to a person so far, all of the city police departments have said that their working relationship with the sheriff's department is very positive. Of course, like many of you, attended the Canby Ferry Town Hall, and I went to the Clackamas County Strangulation Response Initiative the other night, learning how our first responders are learning how to deal with strangulation issues. I want to give a shout out to the ham radio operators who are a very important part of our emergency response system, especially when communication systems go down. This last year, they donated over 6,700 hours of their time to prepare for emergencies and otherwise support us in some emergencies, which has a cash value of about $162,000. So those men and women that are doing the ham radio work for us should be commended, and I thank them very much. Finally, we'll go to the dog. This is Barney. He's a quiet guy who is looking for a new forever home. He's a cuddly guy who loves to be with people. He likes to leap into laps and stay there. He also loves belly rubs, scratches, and just having all the attention on him all the time. Any children in the home should be 9 years or older. If he sounds like a perfect match for you, please go and meet him today. For more information about Barney or other adoptable dogs, please contact Dog Services at 503-655-8628 or www.clackamas.us/dogs.
Thank you, Ken. That was excellent.
Radio career.
Next week, we have a new administrator. I look forward to working with him. I think it's going to be a bit of a fire hose experience. Thankfully, you're here to help. And your knowledge on the budget will be invaluable, I assure you.
Forward to it.
Especially with all the people out there who seem to want us to help. It's going to be challenging. We have a courthouse to build, and that's our number one goal. And that will be up here. Justice is not served in the old courthouse, and it's not safe. You know, I signed a contract to remodel my home in late 2016. It is almost ready. You hear, almost ready. But today, I did something I've been looking forward to for a long time, and something that all of us should consider, because I had 5 people working on my installing solar panels on my barn. 5 people for 3 days. And the solar panels were made in Hillsboro. And just while they were putting it up, the meter was turning backwards so fast they had to shut it off because tomorrow PGE comes and inspects it. So 60 panels from Hillsboro, 5 people, 3 days. There's a lot of work in green energy available out there. And I will literally not pay a dime for my electric bill, which was $359 last month. And while they were working on my house one month, $605 when there was no roof for 3 months in the winter. So I'm so excited to have solar on my barn. So with that, thanks everyone for coming. It was a tough decision, but one that had to be made, and I think it was the right decision, and thank you for your courage. With that, we're adjourned.